because they're so nervous and they follow the leader. But I think warming up those tyres don't do a lot to it, and really it's more important to get your brakes warm and just get yourself psyched up so that when the time comes to go, you're onto it. It's really, I think at the start of the race, you're going to see Peter Brock and Grice really in there mixing it. And as Mike said, it's going to be very important for Pirro to get up and try to split the Texaco Sierras right at the start.
Brian Lawrence, we've had a number of picks from a number of people, and I think all of our commentators have had their say and opinion. You don't want to make any last-minute changes?
No, I believe your winners in your top 8 cars. I wouldn't go much further than that. I don't know about the reliability of those Sierras around here because of the nature of the circuit, but you know, somebody's got to do those 500 k's by 5 o'clock tonight. In terms of numbers, the BMWs would probably have to be an odds-on favourite, but I'll talk to Gate about 5 about it.
And ready now for the start-finish line. Lights will turn to green. And across the line, it'll be the 2 Sierras coming down to the Air New Zealand hairpin. No start. Have that confirmed?
No, they're right at time yet, so they...
One warm-up lap beyond the pace car. But I tell you what, they lit up, and the cut and thrust has already started.
There's a fair amount of nerves out there, no doubt.
Well, until they give it a halt, I'll tell you what, Grice is warming the tyres up nicely as he zeroes in behind them, and they work Jervis Key for the first time.
Okay, definitely no start on that lap, so give them a chance to form up again in the right rows. They must be in order. They must be in the right grid order when they come round behind the pace car. It's a little like watching a speedway start or karting. And if they're out of line or whatever, then they won't get a start again. We're up to time, 10 seconds to go now until 1 o'clock. This time round, if they're in the right order, they should get the green.
I don't know how the order's been split up, Tony, but certainly the 2 Sierra boys were not going to even take a risk on it. Alan Grice has formed up behind them, as you can see, and they've just sprinted away from the rest of the field.
I can't see them getting a start this time round, unless they're in some better semblance of order. I think this is perhaps a little tactics here.
Well, there's a little bit of confusion down here. We're just trying to make sure that we're going to... The lights definitely didn't turn to green, and now they're trying to wave them down.
Clerk of the course, Robbie Lester, out there making sure that they do slow down. I think really that the cars in the front have ensured that there wasn't a start this lap round. They know they've got to be in order. They knew last time it was a possibility, but the lights didn't go green. They were going to do another lap and form up. The Sierras decided to disappear and do whatever was needed, warm up the brakes and tyres. Alan Grice behind them. And they will now know that Robbie Lester is not going to let a race start until the order has formed up, so they come into line.
But boy, oh boy, has Grice really set the scene. He is going to go for it, and you can be assured that he is going to be there with those Texaco Sierras. I think really the Sierras have picked the wrong cars for the start of this race. The D2s are going to take too long to get warm.
Well, I think maybe they've taken full advantage of a little sprint to put a little more warmth in them too, Robbie.
You can betcha.
Rob Lester's just actually giving a start delayed signal now to the drivers coming down the straight. But there's no doubt about it, Grice certainly wasn't letting any opportunity slip him by.
Well, they took off, really, like the race was on, and none of the other cars had any opportunity. I think by the time they went beneath the lights, they hadn't looked up. The lights certainly weren't on green, but Grice, no prizes for running third. He was up amongst them.
The team managers for the Texaco cars are going to be concerned at this stage because they were trying, there's Rudy there now looking, and he was going to try to get through to the 2 hours so that he could have one pit stop equal to the M3s, he said this morning. And of course,
they're right on the limit. They're right on the limit for that,
they sure are. And having to do these extra laps, you can see how concerned he is. He is probably going to be wanting to put some more fuel in those cars.
Okay, let's get a word from Robbie Lester.
Undisciplined start. I'm not prepared to let them go in that kind of undisciplined format. They were quite clearly told that I needed to see the tail of the field to give everybody a fair chance. There's everybody out there have got to have a fair opportunity at the start.
How on earth do you do that with the pace car, though?
The pace car is to slow them down over the bridge. Once the pace car pulled off the pits, the front cars then accelerated immediately, counter to the instructions I quite clearly gave them prior to the start. I told them they had to stay just on the cam to ensure that the tail could stay with them to get them over the start-finish line in order. And I will send them around half the day if I have to until they discipline themselves.
So you're just going to keep this up until such time as you're happy?
Until such time as I'm happy, certainly. I owe everybody a fair start, not just the front of the grid.
Well, that's Robbie Lester, and the situation on the grid at the moment, as you can see Robbie walking down there, is that we are waiting now for the Texaco cars plus the number 3 Alan Grice car to come back round, and here they come working their way up through the gaggle of cars that are assembled further down the grid to work their way back to the front. And I don't know how they're going to get through there, but I'm sure if I know Klaus Niedwitz, he'll barge his way through, and that's exactly what he's doing right now as he works his way up by the Sleepyhead car and towards us. And Klaus Niedwitz working his way back into the front of the grid, and behind him we see Steve Soper there as well. And as you heard Robbie Lester say, we'll just form up, and if it takes all day, it'll take all day.
Thanks, John. To be fair to Robbie Lester, that was all said at the driver's briefing. There is no excuse for it whatever. By the same token, when you've got a race like this at stake, you don't want to miss the start.
Yes, I firmly agree with Robbie Lester. He was so insistent at the driver's briefing on Friday that he would not start until he could see the majority of the field on the start finishing straight. And the two Texaco boys just lit up the racetrack and they were gone.
Go the tempo I like.
Hang on. Klaus Niedwitz, your reaction to the rather controversial start?
No, I don't know what happened, but I can go my tempo what I would like to go, and because I stay on pole position, so I don't see a reason to stop the race.
So you feel then that everything was right and proper, and that the race should have been allowed to continue?
Yes, I did a perfect start. It was no danger for me in the first corner, so I don't understand the decision, the organizer.
The only minor complicating factor in Klaus Niedwitz's view is that he couldn't see the rest of the field and he hadn't been given a green light. Interesting way to keep the nerves on edge. Okay, we'll take a break. They're going to take a few minutes to get set up. We'll take a break and be back in just a few moments.
Has not yet started. Klaus Niedwitz and Steve Soper, particularly in those Ford Sierra Cosworth RS500s, the Eggenberger Texaco cars, the fastest cars in practice, were away to what they thought was the start, but there was a red light. It wasn't the official start. The cars have now reformed. Let's go back and have a look at what happened in that false start with Tony Palmer.
Well, we certainly had the red light on at this stage. Looking out the window, I could see green flags around the circuit. So the green flags were up, but as they went past the start-finish line, there was no red light. Green flags and a red light. Robbie Lester has a point in saying that he wanted to see all of, or the majority of the field coming over the bridge. And Klaus Niedwitz has a point also in that he was the pole car, and provided nobody passes him, then it should be clear for a start. So it would seem to be in the starter's hands. He should have perhaps pushed the green light button because the flags around the circuit were showing green. Whichever way it was, and whoever is to blame, we will have another start.
Well, the end result, I think, will probably be the same on the restart with the two Texaco Sierras. There's Klaus Ludwig, Charlie Lamb from Schnitzer BMW, having a chat about their interpretation of what should have happened or should not have happened. But it has happened, and nothing can change that. Rob Lester, the man in the spotlight at the moment. They're just about ready to get the field underway yet again. No doubt about the two Texaco boys and the Eggenberger Sierras, Steve Soper and Klaus Niedwitz.
I wonder if it will have the effect, though, of making them form up a little closer this time around. Robbie Francevic, I guess it jangles the nerves just a little to have an episode like that, but one imagines they'll be a little closer formed this time.
Sure does, but I think that Klaus will do exactly the same thing again. Like as soon as he comes around that corner, the pace car leaves the circuit, he is going to be flat to the floor, and I think you'll see a repeat of the last start, except this time, hopefully, the green light will come on with it.
Hoping for a start this time around as they lead off. Niedwitz leads them. And Soper. That hairpin bend, which is the first corner. Have a look around the circuit for you again. A little difficult to see when the cameras are on the ground. Nice to have an overview. This is where they come off the wharf and onto the street. Debbie Lester in the pace car. It's Robbie's daughter. They weave around again, down Jervois Quay, crossing the road from left hand to right hand.
Maybe Robbie promised his daughters 2 runs with the pace car today. It was in the arrangements at breakfast. However, we'll have everyone hot to go. Steve Soper and Klaus Needswitz share the front row. Alan Grice and Emanuele Pirro in row 2. George Fury, Peter Brock in row 3. Then Jimmy Richards. And of course the Bajent, Bowcat, Crosby combo on the outside of that row.
Surprising actually how well these Nissans have qualified. When we saw these purpose-built race cars and works teams and enormous backing here, I know a lot of people, Brian Lawrence, thought that the Nissans were just going to be completely outclassed, and that's been disproved totally.
They've certainly done a brilliant job. Ross Stone's the man basically behind these cars, and he's a man who has a tremendous amount of experience in building and fine-tuning of race cars, and I think that the full credit goes to him as well as to Ken Bajent and Graham Balcott, 2 very dedicated Auckland businessmen who've crossed the Tasman more times than they care to remember. This rolling start thing, I think, can be made a little bit of a farce. There's the Texaco cars, and you look at the first 3 or 4 rows up there, but down the back, the guys there are they're giving these guys a hard time. They're not staying up on the pace. I believe the speed of the pace car is too slow for what we should be doing around here, but there's no way that they're going to get these cars all in the start-finish straight, and I honestly think that the Texaco cars, they're just off and gone. They haven't got time to muck around with this stuff. They've got far too much at stake, and look how far they're spread out already. They're not getting the back markers up. They are the guys that are causing the problems, not the fellas up the front.
I've got a funny feeling that they're going to let him go this time round anyway.
I would say so. From here on, though, the pace car, as Brian has mentioned, may not have the pace up to what would be required, but the car should be starting to form up in rows.
They haven't got much space
Texaco
to
boys
do
are
it.
handling that quite nicely at the moment. They've got single file and taking up all the racetrack, warming the tyres up. So Rob Lester will have to take a visit to the local optometrist if he hopes to see the entire field. However, I would think that they'll flash greens next time they come down the start-finishing straight. Grice, in the meantime, has been gathered up here by Pirro on the inside.
We'll keep an eye on the light for you. Come round.
Yes, they have slowed it up, and they have in fact worked into rows of 2 as they come up and over the bridge. Now, as soon as the pace car heads to the pits, don't be surprised if you see the Texacos get ready to stand on it. Now, it isn't going to be a slower start. Coming down for the start, the pace car goes to the pits, and we should have the green light on. Beautiful start this time for the Nissan Mobil 500. 87 edition, they're across the line. Down the inside, Steve Soper, Grice on the outside of Pirro. Heading down to Air New Zealand hairpin for the first time, it will be Soper, the man looking for a hat trick this weekend. Needsmith sits right in behind him. Alan Grice is the next one. Brock's made a good start. He's in behind Pirro. And also a great start there from Georgie Fury as they head on to the downtown course and onto the long back straight.
We'll give him a lap to settle down and then start to discuss the tactics, as I understand it, from Steve Soper and the Eggenberger team. It will be a case of trying to get one car at least of those 2 away with a break on the field.
Peter Brock, the one making the move up here behind Pirro as well. They go off the back straight. Grice is still in 3rd. Emanuele Pirro is 4th. Peter Brock then coming up, followed by Farmer George Fury. Then Graham Balcott sitting right in behind them. But the Texaco boys into the left-hander, and Grice a little closer this time. In fact, he's going to put plenty of pressure on them. And look at Brock working on Pirro at this stage. Jimmy Richards running beautifully there. John Franco Brancatelli is the next one, followed by Gruyard, and then Larry Perkins going through.
Well, this is an excellent start from Alan Grice. He's not letting them get away at all. They are hoping to make the race pace around 34 or 35. It's 1 minute 34 or 35. And as we know, there are Commodores, there are BMWs, and there are Nissan Skylines which run on that pace. They hope to get one of the Texaco cars away with a break. They're sitting together at the moment. Grice in behind them, in Pirro.
Klaus Needswitz making maybe a small move there on Steve Soper, but Soper just driving to team instructions. Go your hardest and we'll worry about the World Championship points a little later in the day. Neatsvitz in second spot, Grice is third, followed by Pirro. So we've got a good scrap going on at the front between the two Texaco boys. They open a little break over the Commodore, but Grice is able to pull them back.
Robbie, characteristic of Alan Grice not to let anyone get away, regardless of what he thinks he can realistically run at.
But unbelievable, as I said at the start. Normally you'd have seen the two Texaco cars 2 or 3 seconds out by this stage. Here they are with the field right on their hammer, and it's going to be interesting to see whose tyres come on quickest. They're going to be ones that are going to be charging.
Don't expect anything to be completely up to working temperature until a couple of laps have gone. And if the Texaco Sierras are going to make a break, they can do it in a lap or so's time. Gricey's still hanging in there, then Pirro, then Brock, then Fury.
At this stage of the race, they're just running on nerves because the cars are skating and sliding everywhere, and this is when the real good drivers come into their own. Give them another 4 or 5 laps and the pattern will settle. But there you are, the Texaco Sierras are not pulling away from this field. And to win the race, they are going to have to be at least a lap ahead come half distance.
Grice still running in third. Pirro doing a good job there, staying in touch with Grice and at the same time trying to fend off Peter Brock, who wants to win this one for the third time in 3 years. But across the start-finishing line, it's the great Brit, Steve Soper, Klaus Neatsvitz, Alan Grice, followed by Emanuele Pirro. Peter Brock is the next one through, then followed by Kent Bagent, or Graham Bowkett, I should say, as they go into the left-hander at Air New Zealand. Good start from George Fury also. He's up in the top 6 at the moment. And Jimmy Richards, also a great start.
I think Brian Lawrence is going to be intriguing to see if Jim Richards can stay on pace with the Works BMs. That is an older model. It does have different suspension. It doesn't get traction.
Yeah, Richards is very much an endurance king. He's been many, many years behind the wheel of these BMWs. He has a tremendous amount of experience to draw on. I think look at him in about 15 or 20 minutes time, and he will be sort of splitting, you know, some of the Works cars there. You can be rest assured that if the car doesn't break, Richards will bring it home. There's the second of the Nissan Skylines coming up the inside there after not a particularly good start. Alan Grice at the moment is probably putting a little more faith in his tyres than normal, bearing in mind that he's carrying a lot more weight on board. I'm not talking about Alan himself, I'm talking about the Chickadee Commodore. The BMW will be a little bit lighter on tyres, but as long as he can just keep those Texaco Sierras in sight, he'll be pretty happy, and to keep Brock behind him, it's not a bad race pattern at this stage.
Looking at Alan Grice, I was talking to co-driver Wynne Percy this morning after he'd been on a little warm-up at about 9 o'clock this morning, which he did on full tanks, and said he was doing quicker times than they had in practice yesterday. He thought the car actually handled better with a full tank. He's very, very confident of the way it can run, and both he and, I guess Grice is not surprised, but both he and Grice were commenting on just how well these Yokohama tyres stand up.
I think the biggest problem that Grice has got is not staying in touch with the Sierras. That's fending off Emanuele Pirro, who will just about climb into his trunk in a moment. They go through Air New Zealand, work their way up to the right-hander, brings them on to the main street. And Pirro is all over Grice and taking Brock along for the ride as well.
It'll be a great battle out front with the Sierras, behind them the Commodores and BMWs, and the Nissan's not too far away. There's Grice, there's Pirro, there's Brock. Jimmy Richards falling back just a little.
Big gaps starting to open even over the first 10 cars. We noticed that Emanuele Pirro has been able to lose Peter Brock. Glenn Seaton, meantime, is fighting back through the pack, coming down on the inside here on the back straight. Come on, boys, in with a bit of pressure on. And that, of course, was Marcus Osterreich. So Seaton moves up one spot.
Sliding under Osterreich under brakes, smoking a tyre, the inside right.
Sure, if Pirro could get past Grice, he'd be right up on the back of the Sierras, because Grice is definitely slowing him up. And further back in the field, we've got the number 10 second Melbourne Holden, the second Holden car, which has got his back bumper hanging off, and the Mideki Sierra is also in trouble with bits hanging off it. So they've been having a battle further back.
A little later in the afternoon, we'll be able to find out exactly what the back bumper contacted with. Neil Crompton driving at the moment. He'll be joining our commentary team later in the afternoon.
The start-finishing line again. Number 6, Steve Soper of Great Britain in the Ford Texaco Sierra, leads from teammate Klaus Neatsvitz. Third is Alan Grice in the Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore, and fourth and pressing all the time is Emanuele Pirro in the BMW M3.
No question, Grice is holding him back just a little, and Brock trying to pick up the gap. As the Sierras start to disappear and make just a little bit of a break in the early stages of the race. We'll be back very shortly as the Sierras disappear out in front and see what sort of a lead they can pull.
Probably pick him up on the main street. We'll wait and see. The little M3 has just been absolutely blitzing the opposition. No, he's able to pull away from Grice, and from this point on, Grice's car is already dancing around a little under brakes. Now the race ahead for Pirro is to pull up as much as he can on the inside, but Grice is coming back for another run down here on the inside. They're already coming up on the first of the lap cars. The two Sierras are through. Steve Soper continues to lead. Klaus Niedzwitz in second. Manuel Pirro is third. And Australia's Alan Grice runs in fourth.
As you say, Mike, the battle now is for Pirro to try and catch the Sierras. And having sat behind Grice, who was definitely holding him back just a little, he's got by now. If Grice can't catch him in a straight line, he can't catch him at all on this circuit. And Pirro really has the battle because there's 4.7 seconds between the leaders and Grice. Pirro's got that gap to make up now as they get through the back market.
Unbelievable to see the effort that Pirro will be putting in at this stage, and you would not believe how hot it gets out here on this Wellington Street circuit. And for him to keep this pace up, he is really pushing that little M3. You can't see another one behind him, and he is really going for it, and that's what they said they were going to do. This is their chance to win the World Championship, and they're going for it.
They've just put a lap on the fronts here, Alpha 33, so Pirro will keep the pressure on, and the Sierra drivers, it won't be too long before they find themselves in a little more traffic.
Looks like maybe the telling feature very shortly as they get into that traffic.
Well, Grice has just found that. He's lost out very badly. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see Grice fall back into the hands of Brock very shortly. And Georgie Fury is just pacing himself nicely. You can expect him to be along very quickly on the tail of Grice. And Jimmy Richards just behind them.
Brock sliding beautifully through the traffic right up the inside. He's a master at it. And he's making up space certainly on Alan Grice in doing so. The Sierra's not having any bother getting through. It's often been said by race drivers, Robbie, that if you're the first man on the track, coming up on the traffic, it's easy. They're not expecting you. Often, if they are expecting you, if you're the second or third car, they move to get out of your way and often get into your way.
No, I'd much rather be the second car, because the first car often gets caught. He thinks they've seen him, but you haven't. Second car, as soon as they get the first car come through, they know the rest are coming through behind and they stay out of the way.
Let's pick up the Sierras and see what that gap now back to Pirro is. As the Sierras come down past the start-finish line, we'll put a clock on the gap from Steve Soper, looking back to third place. And it is widened. The Sierras are starting to pull out now. There's 7 seconds between Steve Soper and Emanuele Pirro.
Not only that, but Grice is falling back very quickly into the clutches of Peter Brock. And then Georgie Fury being the next one through, followed by Jimmy Richards. They've opened up quite a sizable gap over a whole freight train of BMWs. The next one being Marcus Ostreit in the number 40 car, and Larry Perkins.
Running through the order as it was just a few moments ago. Soper, then Ludwig. In fact, it is Niedzwitz in the car. Then Pirro, then Grice, then Brock, then Fury, then Crow, then Bajent, then Seaton, then Chicotto, then Ratzenberger.
There's Peter Brock just coming into view. Going through now is Emanuele Pirro. He's running third. Fourth is the Orange Commodore of Alan Grice. And then right behind him, the man they call Peter Perfect, the 8 times Bathurst winner and back-to-back winner of the Wellington 500. And already dramas in the pits as Glenn Seaton and the number 15 car comes in. That is not good for Glenn Seaton.
Certainly not good where they're parking it.
It has gone right behind the wall. So troubles already for the Peter Jackson Nissan team. George Fury still out there and running. The man we're following at the moment is Peter Brock, who is closing slowly on the number 3 Commodore of Alan Grice and Win Percy.
You can see the tremendous bouncing around that these cars are taking at the moment, and just watching the last couple of laps there is that Grice is using lots and lots of opposite lock there, and his efforts to stay inside of the Pirro BMW, but Brock's starting to close on him now. He's picked up probably 4 or 5 car lengths in that last lap, particularly under brakes and coming out of corners. Gricey's obviously perhaps not in a little bit of trouble, but maybe those tyres are just taking a wee while to settle down.
The other interesting point for Peter Brock is I think that Brock will probably pace himself better in this race than Alan Grice. Grice will be able to try and run with them up front. That hasn't worked. The BMW is already through. I think it'll only be a matter of time before Brocky moves up on the tail of the Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore.
Just looking at how quickly Brock was sliding through the traffic and how easily he seemed to be doing it in comparison to Grice, the car didn't seem to be quite as stressed in terms of handling. I think you're right, Mike, that Brock flashing the lights on and off there, looking for a way through the slower traffic. Wayne Anderson, he's just gone past.
It's unbelievable, you know, that Gricey does this so often. He goes out with brand new fresh tyres and just cooks them in the first 5 laps. Peter, on the other side of it, nurses his tyres as little. If you overheat your tyres in those first 5 laps and they glaze, they just go off in a horrible manner, and Gricey is often doing this. That chase for the front, he loves it.
Here's Brocky now down on the inside. The Sachs Lorimer BMW, the Dulux Auto Colour car. And there is Brocky going through. Closing on Alan Grice. Oops, as we go to the bottom corner, once again you can see just how quickly Klaus Niedzwitz just closes up on the tail of Steve Soper. Soper had a bit of a break on there. He's pulled it back up again, and they're opening the gap all the time over Pirro, Grice, and of course Peter Brock.
Try and get a gap now from first back to third place as the 2 Sierras really do begin to run away.
The interesting thing also is that you get the impression that Niedzwitz would like to pass Soper for the lead and put that beyond any doubt. He's just shadowed Steve Soper all the way. Soper continues in the number 6 car.
And that gap now between Soper, or 2 cars right together, between Soper and Pirro in third place has widened to 11 seconds. So the Texaco Sierra is doing the sensible thing, getting temperature into the tyres, getting everything working right, and then steadily pulling away rather than racing away right from the start.
This is great formation racing from Steve Soper and Klaus Niedzwitz. They've done it like this in Europe throughout the year. They certainly did it during the James Hardy 1000 and more recently in the Calder 500. Soper coming up trumps on both occasions, winning both legs of the Aussie Enduros, and at this stage leads round 10 of the World Touring Car Championship on the streets of Wellington.
Steve Soper driving beautiful, so smooth, and Niedzwitz right behind him. If the 2 of them were being challenged by anybody behind, they'd be able to drive as a team and do the odd little nonchalant blocking. They really are not in that position at all. They don't need to. Sliding through the traffic, the 2 of them do it very well indeed. Starting to spread just a little now, so they're not up against banks of traffic. The 2 just slide underneath. They're perfectly happy.
Texaco cars are running.
Just to pull a little bit of a gap here on Niedzwitz. Oh, and problems already. Number 43.
That's Gruyard.
Gruyard has had a big off. He forgot to hit the brake at Drake by the look of it. And the police car has been nabbed down here as well into the tyre barrier, so whether or not...
Robbie Kerr and Glenn McIntyre's car, I wonder if the 2 of them were connected. We're under yellow, and this might change the pace of the race.
It certainly could, because it might well force them to bring out the pace car. At this stage, they've decided not to. But I don't think they could really afford to leave the car there. We've got dramas in the pits. This is the Colin Giltrap car, the Larry Perkins car. It's also been involved in a skirmish. Larry at the wheel, Denny Holm to take over that car.
I remember last year, 14 finishes from 43 starters, and already that story is starting to emerge. And when it involves the works cars, my goodness, we're surprised at this early stage.
Well, they're working on the Larry Perkins car in the pits with Denny Holm.
Perkins suffered the same fate when David Parsons biffed the car not long into his session back in January, and of course the police Mustang was one that was so badly damaged earlier on.
Let's have a look at this on the replay. A lot of the cameras ISO'd around here. That's already had a crumple. That, of course, is the Mustang. He's already come into contact with one of the other vehicles, and I think at this stage we'll probably head off the circuit, not far from here.
There's about 15 degrees of negative camber on that wheel.
And oink.
Just a big understeer off there. I think it didn't look like it locked anything up. Maybe just picked up the marbles there, and there's a very disappointed Robbie Kerr once again looking at a damaged Ford Mustang.
He said earlier they had bad luck last year. They had the car painted green.
Still
Got
green
news for
inside.
Robbie.
The problem with the green is it is still under the white, Mike.
Yes, that's the truth.
The attrition has started, but Steve Soper and Pierre Dudonne in the Ford Sierra Cosworth RS 500 lead by just over half a second from teammates Klaus Ludwig and Klaus Nietswitz. Will return to the Wellington waterfront in just a moment.
There's one or two other cars been damaged in the course of things here. That's the Nick Johnson car, or is it Neville Crichton car? It's the 18 car, Neville Crichton's. They've obviously contacted someone or something. Car parked down to your left there is Gruyard's car. He hit Robbie Kerr in the Mustang. Kerr hit the wall, then Gruyard hit the wall, then Perkins hit the crash.
You could say, where's DDB when you need him? At this stage, we've got the bumper hanging off the back of the Croaky Crichton Neville Low car, and he's got a Volvo just filling his mirrors up, and he's throwing refuse at the Volvo. Dickie Johnson's team having some problems, but they come beneath the Whittaker Peanut Bridge and down the start-finishing straight.
Back with the race leaders, it is still Steve Soper from Klaus Nietswitz. Steve Soper in the 6 car. And these two really driving a perfect race. Not pressuring each other, just tootling around in comfortable lap times. Neither of them stressing the car or themselves at the moment. I think they might have been foxing just a little because the early lap times looked like 134s rather than 135s. They thought that they could run all day at 35s. They've certainly put the pace on just recently.
The last couple of laps I got them at high 32s, so the Texaco Sierras are really flying at this stage of the race.
When we put that question on Steve Soper earlier in the day with regard to these cars, and if they lost some time in the pits and had to make it up, whether or not they could run at 29s or 30s, he didn't think that they could, at least not for very long. Obviously they can run at 32s, though. They've been doing it for 7 or 8 laps now.
Well, at the end of the back straight, Grice has gone through. There's Peter Brock in the number 5 car. And then further back behind them, you'll see Georgie Fury starting to come into view. In the number 30, Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline, sitting right up behind the 47 BMW. There's Gricey going through, still trying to chase Emanuele Pirro.
Between 2 BMs in front of me where they immediately in front, and they hit the wall and immediately blocked the track, and I couldn't avoid the incident and put the front in, and I had a brake line break at the back at the same time from hitting the brake pedal. It broke the brake line at the same time.
Larry's just been called away. It looks like they are ready to get the car back out on the track.
Well, bad luck for Perkins. The Bimmers getting together for the street beat at Wellington. He's been the first victim. The 18 car still continues with a bit of coach work dragging at the rear. And interesting to see the Sierra still coming up on the Anderson Tulloch Volvo. So they're putting laps on cars we wouldn't have expected them to so early in this race.
Have a look at Klaus Nietswitz here. Just taking a bit of a cautious line. Neville Crichton. It's falling off the back. He doesn't want to get involved in anything silly. Crichton staying on line. The 2 cars split briefly there. Now back together again as Nietswitz slips past.
It's surprising that they've let that Sierra still circulate around there with half the coach work hanging off it, because
We might have seen a black flag.
if it breaks loose, it's going to give somebody a nasty moment coming through the front of the screen, and really it's only maybe 25, 30 seconds in the pits to whistle it away. We'll see if perhaps the marshals, somebody must have seen it by now. at the leading car now. This is Britain's Steve Soper in the Rudy Eggenberger Ford Sierra Cosworth, and he's now pulling a little bit of a gap over his teammate Klaus Niedzwiedz. There's the Anderson brothers and the high-pack Mustang running just ahead of them, and they'll be very happy just to look for a finish. They haven't had a very good run. There's the Sleepyhead car once again in a bit of trouble. The number 25 car that's driven by Ken Page and Graham Balcott, the latter at the wheel at the moment. This car was quite badly damaged here in January. The second car driven by Gary Sprague, and Graham Crosby suffered rather severe damage at Mount Panorama several weeks ago.
I think we can take some credit for that at the moment. The Television 1 sticker seems to be what's holding together the front guard.
They've got to have a bit of luck.
9th place overall, according to our Ulysses computer. And we'll be keeping you up to date courtesy of them during the running of the Nissan Mobil this afternoon.
We are, of course, in debt to Unisys for supplying not only our results, but the official results as well.
Car of Graham Balcott, so I don't think it's really going to cause them a problem. It's just struck it on the left front corner, so it's away from all the major mechanicals that are likely, you know, to upset the thing, the radiator and the different water hoses and that sort of thing. So let's hope that it manages to keep underway. Car 10 showing a little bit of damage at the moment. That's the Neil Crompton, David Oxton, second of the Mobil Holden dealer team cars, with the front spoiler hanging down on the ground. Unfortunately, we're going to witness several $1,000s worth of damage today. There's the offending car at the moment, but it still looks reasonably in touch.
It might be dragging, but at least he's been able to continue. He has the second of the New Zealand Nissan Skyline sitting in there, and it actually just opens up a little, although the Skyline making a big run down here on the inside under brakes, and goes through. And then, of course, the two Ford Sierras sitting right behind. So you'll notice Soper coming up on Neil Crompton at the moment. Klaus Niedzwiedz sits right in behind him, about to put a lap on the Mobil Commodore. He waves them by on the inside to give them a fair run. That's the Crosby Sprague car.
Very courteous driving there from Neil Crompton.
He'd get too much of a roasting if he didn't.
It's incredible how quick these Sierras are going at this stage, but they're just about ready to break into the 31-second lap bracket, because their plan was to run at least 1.5 seconds a lap faster than the opposition, and at the moment they're hardly pulling away at a second a lap. You can see them passing the Holden second car and all these fast cars that really should still be on the same lap with them. It's just fantastic.
This will give you an idea of the speed difference. There's Soper pulling out, takes the Nissan, splits them, and now Niedzwiedz coming down on the outside to feint a pass. Actually, I'll be a little critical of the Nissan driver. He's not watching his mirrors. I tell you, he's giving Niedzwiedz a terrible time, and he's down a lap.
You'll nail him down the back straight here. Obviously, the temperature not being a problem with the Texaco cars. Both drivers have got all the windows up, so they're not looking for the breath of fresh air. And Niedzwiedz, I think it's only a guesstimate, but he seems to be able to pull Soper back when he wants to. He's been further back than this. He got to maybe 8 or 9 car lengths without a problem, and then within a lap he was right back on the bumper again, and he doesn't seem to be getting too upset with the Crosby Sprague Skyline getting in there. No light flashing or any fist waving or anything like that. He seemed reasonably relaxed about it, so we'll just see if he pegs him back again.
One assumes that the cars are still running well within their limits. The story of the race, really from the front end of it anyway, Emanuele Pirro in the BMW M3, the first of them, who was up there with the leaders early on, held back by Grice just a little. Really, the gap has widened enormously. There's now 20 seconds between the two Texaco Sierras and third place. Looking back from the Sierras, a 20-second gap back to third place for Emanuele Pirro. Certainly the BMW was a little more economical, certainly a little more nimble, but it doesn't seem to be making a lot of difference at this stage. And the Texaco Sierra is running absolutely according to plan at the moment. Here is our third place man, car 46, Emanuele Pirro, cross-ended with Roland Ratzenberger, who's cross-entered in 3 cars. His co-driver, in fact, is Roberto Revelia. Last year's or this year as the European Touring Car Champion as the co-driver. It's a very strong team. Little M3, just a little up the pace at the moment.
So it is interesting, Tony, that a while ago Peter Brock had made considerable gains on Alan Grice. Now all of a sudden Grice has picked the pace up and he is absolutely running away from Peter Brock and getting probably within 4 to 5 seconds here of Emmanuel Pirot again.
That was that a few minutes ago. Grice really is pulling up right behind that M3. What's happened, whether they got a problem with the M3 or not.
Now what happens there is that Gricey decided that it was better to take it easy and cool the tyres off a bit. And now that the tyres have stabilised, he's back on the pace again.
He'll warm them up again shortly. It'll be back to a destabilising situation. That's how Gricey attacks Enduros. Probably one of the best sprint car races in the world. Comes to Enduros, he likes to attack them like sprints.
Just have a look now at how close Grice has got. You see him flash through your screen there. As we look at Pirot, here's Brock. Peter Brock through the Drake sweeper.
It's incredible, you know, this is why Peter has won so many endurance races. He is so cool. Like there's Gricey goes through on him, but Peter is just playing the game that he knows, and that is winning the race. And as long as he has no mechanical failures, it looks like Rocky's going to be there towards the end.
Well, there's the gap. You can see it from Pirot back to Alan Grice. It has closed appreciably in the last 5 laps, and they have run away from Peter Brock.
Gricey's looking very smooth on the circuit at the moment, and he is doing a real good job. And like as I said earlier, Pirot maybe could be getting a little bit hot and bothered, and you only have to break your concentration 1 iota in those M3s and you're going to drop off half a second to a second. And once he sees Gricey in his mirrors, he's going to have to really get himself honking again.
That's a good point, I think, Robbie, that the M3s do take such a lot of concentration and such hard pedaling to keep them up on the pace that a minor lapse can drop you back a considerable amount.
Well, it's obviously because he lost sight of the Sierras, it gave him no gauge of concentration. There were nothing behind him. You'll see how good he is now when Gricey gets on his hammer.
The other thing is just noticing the courteous approach from some drivers. I noticed Neville Crichton there a moment ago. He could realise very quickly that Grice was on the tail of Pirot, so he's moved across the road to give him plenty of racing room. We saw him do that at least on 2 other occasions early in this race, so he's watching his mirrors.
So it's the Eggenberger Sierras. Steve Soper in the lead with his teammate Klaus Nietsvits just a second or so behind him. Those two have cleared out, and the Nissan Mobil 500 will return to the Wellington waterfront soon. But there was confusion the first time round. Let's go to our videotape and take the coverage as we look now to the time just after 1 o'clock this afternoon. In fact, we'll have that for you in just a moment, we hope. The cars went onto the main straight for what we hope was the start of the race. We'll perhaps have that update for you in just a moment. In the meantime, we have in our studio here Lou McKinnon, who's the manager of one of the BMW teams, which unfortunately failed to qualify. It's not getting any quieter here, Lou. You've been talking about, even though the fact that these Sierras are way out in front at the moment, they could run into some transmission difficulties later on.
That seems to be the talk at the moment among the pit lane. The only thing is, of course, on the positive side, you can't really imagine a man like Rudy Eggenberger bringing 2 cars all the way to Wellington to have them fail through a transmission failure.
On a circuit like this, which winds so much, is 3.21 kilometres long. How many gear changes do you have to make in the course of a circuit?
Depending on the car and the ratios, but probably the best part of 30 years.
So by the time they get 140 laps in, you multiply that by 30, that's the number of times that they've had to go down through the gears, and that's where the difficulties, if any, that could come for the Sierras, you feel.
You're right. The main thing, the way I see it, of course, is that there are a couple of very slow corners here in Wellington, and it's powering out of those corners that puts the maximum strain on the transmissions.
All right, Lou, thanks for those comments. Let's now go to our update, our first update of the race. The race now just over 35 minutes old, with the Sierras in the lead at the moment. As we now go back to what happened at the start, the cars, the Eggenberger Sierras, thought they were going to start the race proper, but the red light did not change to green, so there was all sorts of confusion with Robbie Lester, the clerk of the course, And the judges having to bring the cars back again. There's Robbie Lester, the man with the air defenders on, gesticulating to get the cars to slow down and reform again. So the start delay. And then the cars having to reform again on the starting grid. The Eggenberger Sierras, along with Alan Grice and the Chickadee Holden. There's Rudy Eggenberger and Klaus Niedzwitz himself, who wasn't particularly happy with the fact that he'd made such a ripper of a start, but then he had to go back and reform again. And obviously quite a few of the spectators here weren't particularly au fait with what was going on either. So they reformed the cars. Remember that Niedzwitz got the flying start when they went on the false start. This time they got in behind the pace car, driven by the clerk of the course, Rob Lester's daughter. And this time they came down and got the green light. The difference on this occasion was that Steve Soper in the number 6 Eggenberger got the jump over his teammate Niedzwitz and was into the Air New Zealand hairpin first. Alan Grice from position 4, also ahead of Emanuele Pirro in the BMW M3, who had started from the 3rd place, but then came the big move from the BMW M3, and Pirro overtook Grice to move into 3rd place. So it's Sierra, and BMW, followed by Commodore of Grice and Commodore of Peter Brock. That's the update from the 1987 Nissan Mobil 500 as we now go back to live pictures and join once again the red and black cars, number 6 and number 7. Steve Soper in 6, Klaus Niedzwitz in 7. It's Eggenberger Sierra 1 and 2 in the Nissan Mobil 500.
And the results at the moment are showing us that the Sierras are first and second, as we can see. Behind them is the Commodore, Grice and Percy. Behind them, the M3 of Bavaria and Pirro. Looking at Grice and Percy, then Brock and Parsons, then Fury and Shield. Those are the gaps between them. Ratzenberger Ostrike entry, then Johnson Hansford, then Bajan Balkett. Crosby the cross entry. Mideki Mira, Hager and Longhurst, then Chicotto and Brancatelli. 13th place, Blomqvist and Grunberg in the first of the Volvos, then the Crosby Sprague entry in the Nissan Skyline Turbo, then Crow and Richards, who've dropped back considerably. 16th place, O'Brien and Hyde in the BMW 635, and 17th, Anderson and Tulloch in the Volvo. In 18th, Lowe and Crichton in the Sierra. In 19th place, Oxton and Crompton in the Commodore. Cameron Wilkinson in 20th place in Commodore, and the 2 German princes, Von Lewis and Von Bayern, in the BMW M3 in 21st place. 22nd place is Radicic and Finau in 325i. Sturmett and Mervison in the M3 in 24th place. Anderson and Anderson in the Mustang GT. That's the way the order is after an hour and 5 minutes is gone.
Still the Sierras running 1-2, but as you saw just prior to that display, Steve Soper moved across the racetrack and allowed Klaus Niedzwitz to come through and lead the race. And Niedzwitz has now established, you'd call it a good gap in one lap over Steve Soper. So Niedzwitz in the number 7 Ford Texaco Sierra leads the Nissan Mobil for 1987. Teammate Soper runs in 2nd spot, Emanuele Pirro in 3rd, and Alan Grice in 4th spot. Neil Crompton, who we saw earlier with the front of the car dragging, was into the pits just shortly, or just a short time ago. Mechanics working to repair the damaged front spoiler and get Neil Crompton back out on the racetrack. We also noticed David Oxton standing by, just in case it was required, but they're getting rid of all that front air dam.
Not repairing it, but it's certainly getting rid of the problem. And probably actually, Mike, it won't do it any harm because it's going to allow a little bit more air in there up around the brakes. And we notice now that while some officials are on the job here, some of them are half asleep. They've actually, after 50 minutes, they've decided to give the Crichton Low car the black flag after that rear panel's been dangling off it, and they've been looking at it for the last 45 or 50 minutes. So they're on the job there. Crompton's away in the 2nd of the Mobil Holden dealer team cars. A young man with a very, very encouraging future, Mike, in front of him.
Yes, I'd definitely say that. No different to Tony or certainly myself. stepping out of the commentary box to have a drive of a sports sedan in Sydney, and that was then followed by 2 races where he went so well, and Peter Brock invited him to drive the second car, and he has actually rewarded Brock's faith in him by the fact that he's had 3 other co-drivers, and despite only, 3 touring car races, he's been faster than all of them.
I wonder, Robbie Francevic, what difference that's going to make, losing the front spoiler off that Commodore. It's going to make a lot of difference aerodynamically.
I think around this circuit very little, because it's quite a low-speed circuit, and it might get a little bit lighter down the main straight, but it shouldn't affect the car at all, really. You know, I had a spoiler come off at Sandown this year, and I didn't even know it was off. I didn't know they pulled it off. The car seemed to go the same. Here's Grice now.
Grice with Graham Bowkett right behind him. Grice once again seems to have slowed off their pace, having picked it up about 7 or 8 laps ago to pull up behind the M3 of Emanuele Pirro.
As Mike was saying before, with Grice, he drives as fast as he possibly can. The tyres get cooked, he eases off for a bit. As soon as he sets the whole race as a series of sprint races, and it's the way he likes to do it.
Pirro not far in front of these 2.
Right, and I also then asked the question, where is Peter Brock? Because at that stage we had Brock sitting right behind Alan Grice, and that has changed somewhat. Only the 24 car, but I see Jim Richards in the background also coming up very smartly through the pack, the 18 car that we mentioned to you before. The second of the DDB Needham Ford Sierras. Neville Crichton at the wheel, black flag, asked to come into the pits and pull all the extraneous coach work that was flapping in the breeze off the car.
There is Brock through Drake Sweeper, around onto the waterfront.
Good looking, very clean and smooth, and doing the job he's out there to do.
Robbie has done since the start, hasn't he? Really hasn't put a foot wrong.
No, and that's what's won him the race two years in a row, so he's on target. Of course, he's got to remember that he's got two Texaco Sierras quite a long way ahead of him, and of course the little M3s are known to keep going, and Piero's back on the case, obviously. As I said, as soon as he saw Grice in his mirrors, he would have got his concentration up again and got his lap times down, and he'll be charging again.
Still 3rd place. Back there, held by Emanuele Pirro. 46 car, Roberto Ravaglia, the co-driver, waiting in the pits. Volvo sitting on their tail, but a lap down, as Alan Grice comes through and has in fact closed that gap up again.
Here's the number 18, Neville Crichton, Dick Johnson Sierra. Looks like they're doing a bit of a job on that car to try and get back of the guard off and the bumper and send Neville Crichton back on his way. And he's underway in the Nissan Mobil 500. The other news was that Glenn Seaton, who we saw withdraw from the race in the number 15 Peter Jackson Skyline, has now been reported to us that he will be taking over car number 30, the George Fury car. So they've cross-entered, and that now means that Seaton will get to drive in the number 30 car.
Of course, in the meanwhile, while the car of Dick Johnson's partners was in the pits, he's been doing a great job. Started well down on the grid, not having had a practice in the second session. He's up into the top 10 now.
Well, the information we have is most of the works BMWs will pit at exactly half distance. The Fords 45 to 50 laps, and of course I think in the case of the Commodore drivers they'll be playing it by ear. Tyres will determine probably their pit stop strategy from the halfway mark of the race. Still those magnificent little Texaco Ford Sierras. Klaus Niedzwitz in number 7, Steve Soper in number 6.
We'll get a check very shortly for you on what kind of average the Texaco Sierras are sitting on for the last 7 or 8 laps, and just see what the race pace is being dictated at by them out front. They seem to certainly have the race under control. Just be intriguing to see what kind of lap times they're turning in lap after lap. A one-off is not all that important unless they're all consistent.
They've now gone under the 31-second bracket into the 30-second bracket. So the Texaco Sierras are going faster and faster. as I said, it's not good enough for them to be leading the race. They've got to be winning by a lap because they've got one extra pit stop.
Looking
It's
at the numbers,
surprising too that you can see on the circuit here the Miedecke car just being lapped by the Sierras, and he was running with them in Australia. However, that's the reason for the big diff that the Texaco cars have. They're running the tight rear end, and that means that they've got a lot more power on the ground.
well, in fact, they have obviously changed the race tactic in the last 2 or 3 laps, Robbie, because they were sitting on 32.8, then 33, 33, 32, 32, around that margin. They put in one of 34, which will put down to traffic, then 33, then 32, last one at 33, and then they've picked it up to 31, high 31. So obviously there's a bit of tactics going on there, and they've decided that now's the time to make another little break.
Keep an eye also on the man running in third. That's Manuel Pirro. He'll be there circulating all day. Been able to hold that spot on the road, just creep away marginally from Alan Grice in the first placed Commodore. He's running in fourth. There's the 35 DSR Sierra.
Because this is the reason the Texaco Sierras are trying to go so hard, because Pirro is right there, and okay, they're outdistancing the rest of the field, but they've got to outdistance Pirro because he is lying second in the World Championship, and that's the man they're racing.
Certainly it was the man putting pressure on them if you spoke to them during practice. It was the one that worried them was Emanuele Pirro in the M3. They went out and did practice times that were quicker than everybody, and then Pirro went out and blasted around the little M3, screaming its head off. Absolute banzai lap, and put up a superb time, a mid-30. And then the Texaco Sierras went out again, and I understand bolted on qualifying tyres for the first time in a number of races. They hadn't been pressured that much, and Pirro was the man that they wanted to get away from.
Sure is, and of course he's got his co-driver that's going to be doing just as good a job, and this is where the race is going to really pat itself out.
Yeah, how would you go if you're out there driving around and you're Emanuele Pirro and you know who's sitting in the pits? You've got Roberto Ravaglia,
which has all season been going as quick, if not quicker, than Pirro himself. So this is a real combination that's going to give those Sierras a real run for their money.
There's Pirro under the fronts here, Alpha 33 through Vision Higher corner. Opening that gap over Alan Grice all the time now. And in amongst some fairly heavy traffic at this stage of the race. As we explained earlier, the World Touring Car Championship points battle. Oh, that's an anxious one. No doubt about it. You watch your mirrors. The other guys are having their race up front. So that was almost a little disastrous moment there for Pirro, coming up on one of the slower cars and then having to wait and then being balked.
I wonder if we got a problem here with the Grice and Percy entry. Staying fairly even.
Let's have a look at this again. Here was Pirro making his move. Blue flags were waving. Make your own arrangements as the driver of 92. And that was a very anxious moment for Pirro. It took him almost another 300 metres to pass that same car. He's clear now, though. Still runs in third.
Brian Bate it was in the 92 car, the little Toyota Corolla GT. Co-driving, it's a Bate and Rogers entry. Making life a little hard for Pirro then.
The information we have is that George Fury in the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline is making great inroads at the tail of Peter Brock's car. Brock at the moment, I think, we're still running in fifth on the racetrack. And that was a good move from Brock on some of the slower cars. He'll sort them out. And George Fury is getting closer all the time to Peter Brock.
It's not hard to see why some of these overseas drivers get a little bit upset with the driver behaviour of some of the Kiwis. Some of them who really, despite the fact that they're busy out there, it's the same for everybody. They're all busy, but you know, it's just that little second here and a couple of seconds there that can make a difference, particularly when it comes to overtaking on the turns. On the straight, it's not so bad, but you know, there's a lot of time to be made or lost under braking or accelerating out of a corner, and I think a few of them could use that rear vision mirror just a little bit better.
Let's keep an eye on George Fury, see what kind of rate he can close at. This is the gap looking back, and it's not that big.
Georgie Fury was pretty close to picking up the Australian Touring Car Championship back in 1986. 6, except one Kiwi by the name of Robbie Francevic. Broke his heart almost in a Volvo Turbo. Robbie picking up the title, George placing second. And then George this year playing virtually rear gunner to Glenn Seaton, who chased Jim Richards for the title and lost out in the last race drama at Sydney's Oran Park.
By the way, the little time you'll see on the top left-hand corner of your screen, which you saw a couple of minutes ago with George Fury registering 2 minutes 07, that's the gap from the leaders back to him. That's a rather large gap at the moment. Fury, if he can get close to Peter Brock, that might be a good dice to watch. He's making up the ground at the moment. The two drivers know each other very well. They've raced against each other on many occasions and certainly trust each other.
Well, judging by what we've just seen in the last lap, Brock's got a real break in traffic there. And notice there's the gap. There's Brock in view, coming down Jervois Key. And the number 5, Mobil Commodore. George is probably about 3 to 4 seconds in arrears. That's a struggle that will follow during the course of the next 10 or 20 laps.
The car between them, of course, is Charlie O'Brien and Avon Hyde's car. Charlie O'Brien at the wheel at the moment. The 635, Trevor Crow's second car, which Jimmy Richards is cross-entered in. Doing a good job, Charlie O'Brien. Wide lines for George Fury. Obviously pressing on.
I think they've done a fine job with the Nissan Skyline. I think Robbie would agree with me. The car is not the best aerodynamically. And George and Glenn, Fred Gibson's team, have put a lot of development work into the car, and they have perhaps a more exciting package for 88.
They sure have, and you would think, really, I would say that Fred's team would be one of the most professional teams in the world. Together with the JPS team, I would say they could put it with any team anywhere in the world, and Fred's quite excited about the new car next year, and Nissan have put their faith behind the whole outfit, and they're continuing with their big motor racing campaign in Australasia, so we're looking forward to maybe having George becoming an Australian touring car champion in the near future.
The two Texaco Ford Sierras, Klaus Ludwig, Klaus Niedzwitz. Niedzwitz at the wheel of the 7 car at the moment, leads from Steve Soper, and there is our race leader. The man, they say, who's in a class of his own.
I think there's 2 drivers in this car in a class of their own, isn't it?
It's surprising and hard to work out the tactics at the moment, because Steve Soper is a good second slower than the lead car at the moment, and there he is in the picture behind now, but like he has dropped about 3 or 4 seconds, and I can see he's trying to pick his pace up, but I don't know whether maybe there might be a problem with the car at this stage, but doesn't look like it's smoking or anything.
No, you're right. In fact, let's keep an eye on that 6 car, because it has certainly dropped off the pace.
I wonder if it could be something as simple as conserving gas after the aborted start. I know that they were on the limit. We'll get a check on that in the next 5 or 6 laps and just see what he's dropped to. In the meantime, we're getting a check on that battle down with Peter Brock, George Fury and Jimmy Richards. See how they're progressing in terms of lap times when we compare them with what the Sierras are doing out front. There's no question that the 2 out front are in a race of their own, or one of them is at the moment.
There's one of the Volvos coming into the pits also. Our boys in the pits will be reporting on that. 2-car Volvo team for Ubik's copiers.
I know one of the reasons why they have to keep coming in is to top up the water for the intercooler. It's something as silly as that. They can keep going with gas and tyres and everything else, but they've got a little water bottle that needs to be topped up with a couple of pints each time. Because it's homologated that size, there's nothing they can do about it.
They've got problems with that one at the moment, though.
Looks to me like that car's going to be heading for the back of the pits, because there's no real activity around it. The mechanics are now getting ready to push it. So that could be the end of that Volvo for this race.
Ulf Granberg, Stig Blomqvist. Major problems for them with the Volvo out. In the meantime, Steve Soper continues running at second on the road, acknowledging that the Cameron car had pulled over and let him through. So as the second place Ford Sierra continues, things don't look too good for the Ubix copy as Volvo 240 Turbo of Ulf Granberg and Stig Blomqvist.
Of course, that's the number 1 car in their team, so that was the car they were hoping would be right up there with them. Dick Johnson, meanwhile, is still going well, and he's well up in the top 10 now, and I watched him go past just a short while ago, and he looked like he was really charging.
Yes, he's made it up to 8th, Robbie. That's not bad. He's had a wretched weekend, Dick Johnson. Things aren't going too well for their 18 car that's been in for a black flag situation to remove the coach work from the Neville Crichton car. And Dick, of course, will be handing over.
Steve's car looks quite smooth on the circuit at the moment, and back to Grice, of course, trying to get through the traffic. It's funny, in this race in Wellington, we often have a lot of problem with traffic, but I think it's because you get so many drivers and teams that don't do enough racing and come to these big races, and of course Wellington being so tight, they do get themselves into a bit of problems.
Well, you'll notice Grice probably in the next lap will put a lap on one of the more interesting combinations, Baron von Lois and Prince Leopold von Bayern of Bavaria.
Yes.
He lives in a castle and all the trims, just like yourself, Robbie, you'd understand that.
I wish I had the money that he had, and I'd probably be out there racing against him.
Well, he's only made one visit to the Down Under Shores, and that was about 4 years ago, to drive one of the black JPS BMWs at Bathurst. Here's Alan Grice coming up on the car at the moment. Prince Leopold von Bayern at the wheel. Prince of Bavaria.
It's always harder to pass the cars that are just about at your pace, like the slower cars you zoom past, but these other cars that you catch later in the race are sometimes very, very difficult to lap.
Rice has just given him a royal flush. He's off, and the Prince of the 62 BM continues. Good to see him here for the Nissan Mobil 500 on the streets of Wellington.
Let's update the situation then. Just 1 hour into the race. A quarter of the distance gone, and it's Europe 1, 2 and 3. Australia 4, 5 and 6. Ludwig and Nietswitz first. Soper and Dudone second. Ravalia with Pirro at the wheel in the BMW M3 holding third place at the moment. Over the page and in fourth place, it's Alan Grice at the wheel of the Holden Commodore. Peter Brock at the wheel of his Holden Commodore. And George Fury now teamed up with his old friend young Glenn Seaton in car number 30 holding in sixth place. So the Sierras are first and second, the BMW is third, and Commodore are fourth and fifth, and the Skyline in sixth place. That's the situation after 1 hour in the Nissan Mobil 500 on the Wellington waterfront.
The place is looking like being lapped by the Texaco Ford Sierras, the Works Eggenberger cars coming up on a privateer. And that's just an indication of how fast the race pace is. We led you to believe a little while ago that Jimmy Richards was gaining well and coming up in the field there. Well, he made a pit stop and changed tyres. Not quite sure yet if they have changed drivers or if Jim Richards went back out, but that was an unscheduled stop. They have changed tyres, and so they have dropped back down to 12th place. He apparently had flat spotted the tyres, we're told, from the pits, and there's no point in running around on square tyres, so they came in and changed them. The sensible thing to do. It's a long race. So Richards still in the car.
Richards doing a great job. He'll make it back up into the top 10, but I take your point, Tony. Johnson has been one of the big movers, coming up to 7th in the field in the DDB Needham Sierra Cosworth. Still the two Eggenberger Ford Sierras lead from Emanuele Pirro, Alan Grice, Brock Fury, then Dick Johnson. Then the next of the M3s, Roland Ratzenberger, Marcus Osterreich and Roberto Ravalia. Then Andrew Madecki making it up in the top 10, followed by Tony Longhurst and Alfred Hager, rounding them off in car number 41. That's the top 10 so far.
Going back to the race leaders, the Texaco Ford Sierras. Just see what has happened with the development of that gap between Soper and Nietswitz. As Jimmy Richards goes through in the 53 car, here are our leaders, and they have gathered themselves back again. Soper still leads, Nietswitz is back within reach. And this is Dick Johnson under threat.
It's amazing how good these Europeans are, because I was talking to Jim Richards this morning, and they opted to run the D5 softer compound today, which should work on a road circuit. The Texaco cars went for the harder D2s, and of course Jim flat spotted his tyres, because obviously the pace out there is a lot harder than everybody thinks, and the new seal on lots of parts of the circuit are obviously being a lot tougher on the tyres than everybody would have thought.
Just to give you an idea of lap times, George Fury sitting on round mid-34s, 1:34 that is. Trevor Crowe and Jim Richards. Well, Richards at the wheel. 1:35 a couple of laps ago, which is when they had the problem with the tyres. They've come back out and they're on 34s, high 34s. And Peter Brock consistently going around 35.4, 35.1, 35.2, 34.7 and 35.1. Peter Brock keeping on consistent pace. Jimmy Richards has done the same since he got back out again.
Here's Ludwig.
Having awful
Nisbets, I
trouble
should say. Yes, making a run on Johnson. Johnson obviously is giving him a tough time.
Certainly not going to let him get by without having to work for it.
He's doing just that. Meanwhile, Grice is closing all the time on Manueli Pirro, so things are getting tied up there for third spot as well.
I gather down in the pits we have the Commodore of Graham Cameron and Wayne Wilkinson, which you can see the problem with.
That's a legacy of street racing in Wellington. You don't blame too much of that on drivers because it can happen. He's had a good old crease down the side door.
I gather it happened at the end of the straight in the Vision Higher corner by the Michael Fowler Centre. John Carball's in the pits. Let's see if we can get a word with Wayne Wilkinson.
Graham Cameron, you were at the wheel. What happened there?
Oh, I just gone round a slower car, understeered into the arm coat.
And what is the condition of it now? What's the position?
Well, it's broken the steering rack, so we won't be able to go any further.
Bad luck there. Graham Cameron out of the race, out of the Nissan Mobil 500.
Looks as though Wayne Wilkinson's not going to get a drive. Disappointment for him, but if you've broken a steering rack, unless you've got another one to bolt in very quickly and a very experienced crew to be able to do it that quickly, I guess you do the sensible thing and give it away.
Alan Grice, meantime, closing up on a couple of these BMWs. The first car he's sitting right behind now is Gianfranco Brancatelli. He'll be putting a lap on Brancatelli. I don't think Mark Petch would be very happy about that because they haven't had the best run on this race so far. But just ahead of the Petch car is, of course, Emanuele Pirro. And there he is coming down on the inside of Neil Crompton, followed by Grice. Surprisingly, I thought the BMW, Robbie Francevic, would have been able to run away from Grice, but it surprises me to see Grice so competitive and sitting just in behind Pirro, still challenging for that third spot.
It really is, and like he was confident, very confident this morning that he had the tyres that would do the job. And the other thing that surprises me is Brancatelli letting Pirro through as easily as they do, because they've been the strong runners in the last 2 or 3 races.
Well, they come through Drake Corner. There you can see Pirro just getting away. There's Neil Crompton in 10. We'll wait for them as they come through Mobil Corner. And there goes Pirro, followed by Neil Crompton. He's down a lap. Sitting right behind him is, of course, Alan Grice. And then Gianfranco Brancatelli in the Mark Petch Mechanical Seals entry.
It's incredible. Here is a bunch of cars.
Now that favoured Pirro, that little manoeuvre. He's been able to get away. Grice has now got to deal with Crompton as they come down to Air New Zealand's hairpin. Yes, and Crompton waves him by on the inside. While at the same time covering the track to make sure that Brancatelli doesn't get a sniff of the back of the Commodore.
So Grice back on the pace. Not the front pace, of course. Nobody else is on that. And creeping up behind Emanuele Pirro.
Well, I guess there are a couple of questions about this race so far. Number one, Nisbets is just doing it so easy. He's been able to move away quite well from his teammate Steve Soper. Pirro was running a very strong third and closing just maybe a touch on the second of the Ford Sierras. In turn, he's been gathered up by Alan Grice.
And I really don't think it's the cars or the conditions. I think at this stage of the race, it's really the driving. And of course, as we said before the race started, it's going to be a lot easier for the Texaco cars because the drivers don't have to drive like maniacs, whereas everybody else behind them has to keep so much of their concentration going. And of course, Grice is one of the guys that can do it, and that's why he's still there, because he is really going. And if you look at that car, it is jumping and bouncing, and he is doing everything he can to keep that car on those fast lap times. And the last lap time I got on him was a high 33, which is less than a second off the pace cars. So that is real good lap time.
He's really picked it up, hasn't he? And viewers, don't be confused by the Mobil Holden Commodore that is not far behind Gricey here. Although it's got Brock written on the front windscreen, it is in fact Brock's second car. You have a look at Alan Grice come through. You'll see the Commodore there with Mobil on the front and Brock on the windscreen. But the Brock car that he is driving himself has that same name in white on the windscreen. That one is being driven by Neil Crompton and David Oxon as the backup car for the Brock team.
Noel Brady tells me also that the number 16 Volvo that we saw go to the pits earlier, that was Ulf Granberg and Stig Blomqvist, with problems there. They've been able to rectify the overheating problem they had, and the car is now back in the race. So 2 Volvos still there and running. Grice goes through. He gets that close from time to time to Pirro, and then Pirro runs into traffic, and with the smaller car diving under cars in corners, he's able to open up that gap over a somewhat bigger machine in the Mobil. Commodore getting sideways. Bang, crash in the guardrail. Grice drops it down and Sprague picks it up and off he goes. And that's all it needs. One little lapse in concentration and you can fold a fender over a tyre here at Wellington and cost yourself a race.
I wonder, Mike, if the tyres are starting to get a little tired, because certainly there was a lot of stress on him. Just looking at it again through the Drake sweeper, there was nothing untoward about the way he was going through there. The same amount of pressure as he's being applying to himself and the car. The BMW's been there for a long, long time. That wouldn't have put him off.
I tell you what,
you've got to wonder about the tyres.
I'm just thinking, Tony, if we get to see that a little later again, you'll notice that when Grice went through that corner, he was three-wheeling, so he had nowhere to go. He was absolutely up on 3 wheels, Alan Grice, just before he lost the tail end of it and just tried to revamp a little of the Strathmore collateral in Wellington.
But it's what I was saying, you know, Gricey is really charging in. Like looking at him on the screen, you can't imagine how hard he is really trying out there, and I really give him credit for staying where he is at this stage of the race, and like he's out there trying to win.
Just having a look at it again.
Now watch it from here. Watch the inside rear. It is off the ground. Puts it down marginally. By that stage, it's all turning to mire for Alan Grice. He's lost the tail of the car. Now the whole idea is he knows he's going to whack the wall, but keep it straight and not bring the front back in. And Grice banging his head almost there on the roll cage. Drops it down a gear and takes off again.
He was lucky here. The car was as far round as it was, and it actually digged right at the rear of the car rather than on a guard, which, as you said, could have folded onto a tyre and ruined the tyres and his chances for a while. Gricey, as Robbie Francevic had said a little earlier, picked up the pace in the chase for Emanuele Pirro and was getting down to the mid-33s, and that's pressing on in the Commodore at this stage of the race. This is the time in the race when the driver concentration becomes paramount.
That's why the little M3s will continue to get stronger as this race goes longer. And you'll expect to see a couple of the other cars that are running reasonably well in the field, and I refer to Roland Ratzenberger and Marcus Osterreich, who is 7th at the moment. Expect to see them up through the placings, and I still think perhaps the dark horses in the race. In 10th spot now, Alfred Hager and Tony Longhurst of Australia.
I think it'll be interesting to see when Longhurst gets in that car if the pace picks up at all, because we know him as a hard-charging driver down under. He's somebody who can pick up the pace given the pressure. He loves to respond to pressure, and he has the odd little bit of bother now and again with banging a wall, which he can't afford to do at Wellington. Meanwhile, there's the race leader, Klaus Niedzwitz. Still running away with the lead of this race at a great rate of knots. They're going to need to build the lead for the extra pit stop. They seem to be doing it very, very efficiently at the moment.
And still, it's the number 7 car with Klaus Niedzwitz of West Germany at the wheel, leading by now 18 seconds over teammate Steve Soper, 40 seconds in front of Emanuele Pirro in the first of the BMW M3s. Onto the second page, and it's still Australia in 4, 5 and 6. Alan Grice, sometimes on 3 wheels, most of the time on 4, holding 4th place, slipping back though, and Peter Brock in car number 05 in 5th place, a minute 21 down on the leaders. We'll return to the Wellington waterfront and see how Klaus Niedzwitz progresses in a moment.
Karen Wynne Percy is in there. It was probably a timely area to come into the pits because they'd already bumped the tail of the car on the wall. Windstrider started. And there they got problems. Now they have. He's going to holler for a marshal there for a moment, but Win Percy underway in the Chickadee Commodore. So Alan Grice has stepped out.
Alan, how is it out there?
Well, the track's starting to get very, very greasy. The track is starting to break up down to the hip now. There's quite a lot of oil around, but as far as we're concerned, the car and the tyres and everything are running fine.
You had a couple of close moments out there with some of the opposition, didn't you?
Not so much the opposition as the cars we're lapping. Some of them, most of them are pretty good, but some of them want to race you. You know, they see you coming up and they want to race you and they're a lap or 2 or 3 behind. It's a little bit disappointing.
Everything going to plan?
Yes, it is. That's exactly the plan. We wanted to stay up with the pace, but not push the car too hard yet, so we can sprint home if we have to.
Alan Grice, all the best, and out in the car at the moment we have Win Percy in charge of car number 3.
Thanks, John. Nice to know that Gricey's still prepared to give it a charge at the end of the race if they need to and press on home. Meantime, Dick Johnson has been in the pits, not a particularly fast pit stop, and Harry Hansford is in the car.
And also Peter Brock, I believe, heading to the pits. But let's have a look at young Breakatelli coming down through here on the inside. Sorry about that. We'll just crease the wall. Grabbed almost by a Mark Pitch mechanical seal off the guardrail that time. So a case of almost a big problem for their team. But 05 is already in the pits, Peter Brock. And he'll hand over to the very capable David Parsons of Tasmania. So the 05, what appeared to be a fairly quick pit stop. They were running 5th overall.
They were practicing pit stops and they had one in the warm-up this morning in 19.6 seconds. Just letting Larry Perkins slipping underneath there.
That was sensational. It was almost David Parsons was going out before he got a lap in because Larry arrived underneath him. However, they're back and running.
They were under 20 seconds with their pit stops this morning, and Graham Brown, the team manager, along with Peter Brock, very happy with the way things were operating. Certainly a little more efficient than we saw Grice's pit stop. Perhaps a little more practice in there. Win Percy out on the car now, very capable hands. And Johnson's car out in the hands of Greg Hansford.
And just behind David Parsons is Andrew Madecki. It's not hot out there much, is it? Peter Brock just cooling off in the pit area. I somehow suggested someone has thrown a bucket of water over it. Otherwise, it looks like a scene from Flying High.
Certainly an indication of just what the pace is like out there. Brock is not the sort of fella that gets flustered easily, but he looks tired. Certainly the car has been circulating on good pace. Very muggy weather conditions here on the Wellington waterfront. Warmer than we normally expect at Labour weekend. And the heat generated inside these cars, it really is very, very tiring on the drivers. Together we're looking at a pit stop very shortly for one or two of the top cars. The Commodore is obviously at the end of their tyre life. We've seen Grice and we've seen Brock in on schedule. Nothing awry there. Grice, he almost was awry as he clipped the bank and drank sweeper and managed to get back to the pits and has decided that the tyres were gone. Brock did the same. So everything according to plan for those teams. The Volvo team, they are also a 2-car team at the moment. Back on the circuit with the second car. Have had some problems dropping back in the order. The order still Ludwig and Knightsfides from Soper and Giudone, Ravalia and Pirro, Fury and Shield, Grice and Percy, Ratzenberger and Ostrake, Miedecke Mira, Brock and Parsons, and Hager and Longhurst.
Well, due to those pit stops, I think we'll find that the Grice-Percy pit stop has closed up Andrew Madecki to them. But the race leader is still Klaus Niedzwitz, and here comes the Tal Malmo farmer. Georgie Fury, car 30, the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline. To take over the car for the next leg of the race will be 22-year-old Glenn Seaton. They pulled into the pits running 4th on the road in the Nissan Mobil 500.
And this is our first example of the use of a cross entry today.
Yes. George out of the car helping young Glenn. George elected to wear the lightweight uniform today too because he'd read about the weather predictions and it was in fact going to be quite warm out there.
You notice the other name on the side of the car is Terry Shield. But just explaining a little, You cross-enter your top driver in the second car. So Seaton's in it now.
Out of the pits goes Glenn Seaton, and routine stop. Nothing has changed with the car that you would normally expect. They changed all 4 wheels and tyres.
We're hoping for a report there from Richard Hay down in the pits. A little trouble with the microphone there as George Fury is out of the car, having put Glenn Seaton in. Glenn Seaton's car's gone. We saw it parked in the pits earlier on, so Jerry Shields going to be out of luck for a drive today, and the Nissan, Peter Jackson Nissan team certainly hoping that this remaining car is going to last the duration of the race.
I don't think it'll be too long before we see the Texaco Sierras in for their stop. It's nice to see George Fury as he stepped from the car, and Terry Shield, who was down to co-drive that car. Let's give him a pat on the back and say bad luck. But they're running for a professional team, and Terry won't get to drive today. Glenn Seaton will though, and he's in the number 30 Nissan Skyline at the moment. He'll pick the pace up pretty quickly. He'll throw the car around. They're coming up on the Brancatelli Johnny Cicotto car. So Georgie Fury has probably had time to grab a shot of soda or Coca-Cola and probably evaluate the chances of the Nissan team for the second half of this race. And shortly we're going to the pits for Richard Hay to speak with Georgie Fury.
George, you're looking fairly warm at the moment. It's hard work out there?
Oh, it's pretty good. I get pretty hot in the car, so it doesn't bother me at all. It's a good little track to drive on, so it's been good so far.
They've had problems with the other car. Glenn Seaton's now gone out in yours. Do you think he'll be able to catch the Brock car, which has now got David Parsons at the wheel?
Well, I'm sure that he can catch Parsons. I was catching Brock for a while, but I got held up in traffic, and I think my car's not quite as suitable in traffic as Brock's is with the V8.
What's it like to drive in conditions like this? Is it as hard as a normal race? Do you not think about the fact that you're losing so much body fluid through sweating and so on?
Oh no, it's you look at it as a long distance race. I mean, you've got to drive with some reserve, you know. You can't look at it as a touring car race because you'd use up the car, and you know you'd be too much near the limit, so that on a circuit like this it'd be pretty easy to smack an Armco fence or something.
George Fury just talking to Richard Hay in the pits and checking George Fury's times for the last few laps that he was out, other than the last one where obviously he pitted, so the time is unrealistic. He was on steady, 34.4, 34.5, 34.7, 34.8, lapping around the 34s. What will be interesting now is to get a time on Glenn Seaton and see if he is quicker, with new tyres and with a younger and fresher driver.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know if he's quicker, but he's certainly giving the tyres a nice workout. He's been over the curbs here. All of a sudden he spotted one of the Brock Commodores. He's dispatched Andrew Madecki in about 30 seconds. And here comes the Nissan down the inside. Little attempt there.
David Parsons in the car, the younger of the Brock drivers, and certainly Glenn Seaton and he have intense rivalry. Seaton thinks that he and the car are quicker. He'll want to get by as quickly as possible.
And while that's all happening, got an M3 in the background trying to work out where the clean racing line is around Wellington. But just ahead is a Commodore and a Nissan driver very keen to pass it. There's Madecki going through. In the number 35 car, Perkins is just in front of them. This is a great scrap, this. There goes Madecki. Plenty of traffic on the streets of Wellington, Labor Day Monday.
I know Perkins and Holm were hoping to keep the car out there as long as they possibly could in terms of tyres, and were looking to go a little longer than Brock and Grice. They had an unscheduled stop because of a little ding.
Well, I think there's Perkins going through. The Skyline has been able to get by the Commodore. That was plenty of brave driving on the part of Glenn Seaton. He's through, and there's an M3 can make its own arrangements.
Madecki hanging in there.
I think he'd be pretty happy with his race so far. They're running in around about 9th position overall. They've certainly had their problems on Thursday and Friday up at Manfield with a couple of engines that let go on it through detonation, and then yesterday in the very early stages of time practice they had a rather mammoth diff failure in this car, so it's been a rather expensive weekend. But there's Madecki heading into the pits now, and he'll be handing over to Rotorua is Phil Mirror, the co-driver in the DSIR meter copier's car. This is only its third race meeting. It did Bathurst, Calder a couple of weeks ago.
And now the pressure comes on for Phil Mirror, driving in this company and in a car that he hasn't had a lot of miles in. Andrew Medaki, a very experienced single-seater peddler, a very clever driver, very much underrated in Australia and New Zealand, but proved at Bathurst just a few weeks ago that he can put it with the big fellas anytime. Phil Mirror, you wouldn't expect to be able to drive quite as quickly in the car. He hasn't got anything like the experience of this level of competition, but a very competent driver, and one who has had some testing midweek, cut short by engine problems.
Rather lengthy pit stop. But this one definitely down there, there's a problem in the left rear corner. There's somewhere you can see the mechanics all milling around the back of it. On goes the centre lock wheel nut.
Okay, as one privateer, Sierra leaves the pits with Phil Mirror at the wheel. Let's just have a look at what happened to one of the leaders a few moments ago. Steve Soper car, Soper Dudone. A little bit of a nudge with the Toyota Corolla there. The Corolla going straight ahead. And the Sierra turning left.
Definitely an incident that should never ever have happened, either A, from the Corolla driver's point, to see the part of the black freight train on his way up the rear vision mirror, and no doubt about it, Soper was very, very close, and probably for some reason, I don't know why he wasn't to the right-hand side to get by him.
There's our race leader, Klaus Niedzwitz, in Rudy Eggenberger's Ford Texaco Sierra, comfortably leading this race.
I guess splitting them up just a little, even if it's only a few hundred yards, makes it less likely for the two of them to happen on the same kind of accident or incident.
Well, that's true. I don't know if it ever works out that way. Sometimes you'd like to think it could. At this stage, though, Ludwig and Niedzwitz would feel very, very happy. I know Klaus Ludwig would certainly be happy. He'll be taking the car over during its pit stop. There's the number 6 car. Steve Soper presently running second on the road. He will hand his car over to Belgian Pierre Dudone. And they're coming up behind to put a lap on the number 17 Dick Johnson Ford Sierra, which has Greg Hansford behind the wheel. They've already had a pit stop, and a pretty messy one at that, let me tell you. In fact, they let the air off the car and let it down. It looked like it was on a mechanic's hand at one stage, and then they had to refire it. So it wasn't the best of pit stops from Dickie Johnson.
See how well he can get past Greg Hansford, which he does quite easily. Greg Hansford, a man well known to New Zealand fans as a motorcycle ace, a little like Graham Crosby and Johnny Cicotto, hopping off 2 wheels and into 4 and doing exceptionally well in the process.
The situation is unchanged at the top of the field. Klaus Niedzwitz with his co-driver yet to get in the car, Klaus Ludwig. Steve Soper in second place, 16 seconds down, and nearly 50 seconds down the first of the BMW M3s with Emanuele Pero at the wheel. After this commercial break, we'll update the second hour of the Nissan Mobil.
Fury and Seaton, Hager and Longhurst, Brock and Parsons, Crow and Richards, Johnson and Hansford, Bajan and Bowkett, Crosby and Spray. That's the way the order is at the moment. We're looking for the George Fury Glenn Seaton entry. Glenn Seaton having got in the car when George Fury got out. A little ways back from our race leader, Klaus Niedzwitz, in your picture now. And there's the other car with Steve Soper in it. They're due for a pit stop now. That's Pierre Dudone. Getting the helmet on and mentally prepared to get in the car. Everything to schedule at the moment. We'll get a report from Richard Hay down in that Eggenberger pit as soon as they make the pit stop. And this is where the race may start to change its character just slightly. At the moment, these two comfortably out in the lead. They'll pit one, and then probably 2 or 3 laps later, they'll bring in the other. Don't want to clog up the pits in the same team with the 2 cars in at once. That's one of the worst things that can happen. Just as a point of interest, we're talking about George Fury's car having been taken over by Glenn Seaton. He started off at 46, went down to 36, and is down to 34s already. So picking up the pace in the only remaining Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline Turbo as we await the pit stop for Steve Soper in in that 6 car, sitting in 2nd place. And let's just see what a professional team like the Eggenberger team can do in the way of changing tyres and gassing up. We'd expect they'd be around 19 to 20 seconds. It's about what a professional team should be doing. It's good luck rather than good management. If you get a better time than that, it is definitely bad management, unless there's a problem if you have a worse time than that.
Well, Rudy Eggenberger has probably the best drilled crew in European Touring Car Championship racing. One more lap for the 6 car. Steve Soper remains at the wheel.
Notice when they come in that they have centre locking wheels, just one big nut on the centre axle, unlike the Peter Brock crew, who still run 5 wheel nuts. The reason being that they can gas up, and it takes as long to gas up as it takes to change the wheels, whether it's 5 or 1. So there's no real advantage in having one central locking nut on the tyres if you've got to wait for the man to fill up the gas tank.
I think we can expect the Texaco Eggenberger team for their 2 car pit stop, probably within the next 2 to 3 laps. In the meantime, Needsvits continues to lead from number 6. And we expect to have the first of the Sierras in the pits the next time around.
It's going past the Jimmy Richards Trevor Crowe 53 BMW M3 car at a great rate of knots. The only slight lapse we've seen from either of these Texaco Sierras has been a little wide lines on a couple of places on the circuit just in the last few laps, and you'd expect that the tyres would be starting to wear, starting to get at the end of their competitive life. But really they haven't put a foot wrong, either of them.
The 7th placed Marcus Osterreich, Roland Ratzenberger M3 is already in the pits for its pit stop, and of course 35 is in and out of the pits again. Here's Steve Soper, currently 2nd on the road in the Nissan Mobil 500, heading to the pits for what should be a well-drilled stop. Soper to step out and Pierre Dieudonné to step in. We'll watch the Eggenberger team go to work.
Take the time from the time they stopped. Just see how long it takes to change 4 wheels and tyres and to fill up the gas tank, as well as, of course, changing over the drivers. Steve Soper out of the seat very quickly. They've got to turn the motor off. Till such time as they're ready to go again.
Well, Dieudonné's into the car, Soper's trapping him in. That's taking a little bit longer than you might have expected, but it's still not a worry because the fuel is going in. If you'd see, well, it's splashed everywhere, all over everybody. If you'd seen Rudy Eggenberger with his computer earlier on, you'd understand why the drama of the pit stop as Soper goes out. Not just that, there was more problems because the Madeki Sierra was blocking the exit of that car earlier on, and they thought they were going to have problems getting the car out of the pits. We'll just wander through and see if we can have a quick word with Steve Soper. Steve, things fairly hot out there for you.
Yeah, very hot, but I had a vibration which I didn't know if it was the tyres or the car, so I just stepped the pace down a little bit, but no problem.
You're happy with the way everything's going right now, then? You think that you'll be on for what will probably be 2nd place with the other classes going well at the moment?
Okay, no problem. Quite happy.
Richard Hay talking to Steve Soper, who's just got out of the car for Pierre Dieudonné to get in. As he said, he had a little bit of a vibration in the car. He's obviously going to talk to team boss Rudy Eggenberger about it now, decided that discretion was the better part of valour, and come in and change over drivers, tyres, and fill up with fuel. The pit stop took them 32.9 seconds, which is not quick by their standards, but it's not terribly slow either. A little bit of problem with fuel splashing out, nothing major, and Dieudonné out and will be on the pace within a couple of laps.
I think they could almost afford to have a minute 30 or a 2-minute stop. Have time out for lunch as well, at the rate the cars are running. There's the 6th car, Pierre Dieudonné at the wheel. It won't be too long before the leading Texaco Ford Sierra, that of Klaus Needsvits, heads down pit road with a huge lead for Klaus Ludwig to take over. Everything running according to plan for Rudy Eggenberger's Ford Texaco Roadshow.
So the pit change for Steve Soper has resulted in a change of positions at the top of the table. Klaus Niedzwitz with his pit stop at a driver change not far away. Still the race leader over Emanuele Pirro, also with a pit stop to come, and Steve Soper, after having made the pit stop, back in third place. Let's now check some of the highlights of the second hour or so of this year's Nissan Mobil 500, and it means that some of the drivers have had some problems. There is Kerr and McIntyre, but Peter Brock was doing some fine manoeuvres back around the fourth and fifth place, and Peter Brock looking to maintain that position in amongst the back-marking traffic. But George Fury in car number 30 doing his best to keep him honest. Fury's co-driver now to be Glenn Seaton, his partner from the last Nissan Mobil back in January of this year. Niedzwitz took over the lead during the second hour with Steve Soper, his teammate, who was the early race leader, dropping back. So this is Klaus Niedzwitz in the Texaco Eggenberger Sierra, car number 7. And the big Volvo Turbo, car number 16. The ride of Blomqvist and Dolph Granberg going into the pits. For a time looked as if it was a terminal complaint, but after some work in the radiator, they got the car back into the race. So both the Volvos still circulating at the moment. Dick Johnson in his Sierra was being hard-pressed as well. Johnson, who hasn't had much luck during previous Wellington races. Troubles for Wilkinson and Cameron. A steering rack went, and they become a terminal casualty. They won't be racing again this afternoon. In fourth place, Alan Grice in another Commodore was doing his best to keep his car on the road, sometimes on 3 wheels. Alan Grice running in fourth place, the leading Australians behind the 2 Sierras and the first of the M3s. And at the hairpin, at the top end of the course, Alan Grice having a slight dice with the wall, but he has managed to keep the car intact. And even though they've made the driver change, Grice and now Wyn Percy at the wheel still very much in contention, still in the top 6. But it's car number 7, Klaus Niedzwitz at the wheel, who is the race leader with Alan Grice back in fourth place. Wyn Percy, in fact, at the wheel, and the pit change for car number 7, pit stop for car number 7, not far away.
In fact, Peter, Grice and Percy sitting in fourth place after the pit stop for the Texaco Ford Sierra team. Ludwig still leads, Pirro is second, and Udone is third at the moment. Behind them, Grice and Percy then go back to Glenn Seaton, and behind them there's a bit of a battle there for 5th and 6th places between the Higa Longhurst BMW M3 and the Peter Brock Commodore, the 05 car of Parsons and Brock. David Parsons in the car at the moment as we watch Wyn Percy still holding on to that fourth place on excellent lap times, keeping it consistent, as was Gricey, until his tyres started to go off just a bit.
I'll tell you what, Grice could be thankful he's got such an astute co-driver as Wyn Percy. Wyn can run exactly the same times as Alan Grice, and that all goes well if the car continues to run, just coming beneath the Foster's Bridge.
I'm told he can even do that in a NASCAR.
Yes, they tell me so. Very experienced driver is Winston, and they continue on at this stage, running fourth on the road. Ludwig and Niedzwitz still lead. As soon as they head to the pits, I think you'll find it'll probably be Roberto Ravaglia, Emanuele Pirro's BMW that's been running third all day, the 46 M3, that will take over the lead, and that's where the race should become quite interesting, because we believe the M3s will only have one pit stop.
Let's go back now and have a look, if we can, at the battle. It's raging back here between second Peter Brock car. That's Klaus Niedzwitz getting in the traffic there a little. And I think that's the sort of battle he'll want to avoid if he can, with the substantial margin he's got. That's David Parsons in the Peter Brock car. They were locked in a battle with the Longhurst and Higa M3, which doesn't seem to be in the picture at the moment. In fact, David Parsons' problems are going to be defending against a car that he can't really defend for very long.
They can't be too worried about the fuel economy of the Cosworths, because they've been out there quite a substantially longer time than what the other Cosworths have. The Commodore's been in, Gricey's been in, the Andrew Madiki car, both the Dick Johnson cars have been in. It here's the race leader, the man who's setting the pace. The tank's going to be getting very, very low at this stage of the game.
Parsons thinking about a move on the Volvo, a double shot that time. The 7 car of the Nisbets coming up. The Volvo got caught up in between the Sierra and the Commodore. The Commodore, it'd be interesting to compare the speed, because we just saw only so clearly 30 seconds ago the difference between the Sierra and the Commodore. And the Volvo is in fact be able to hold the Commodore going down the back straight at Jervis Key.
Beats is very, very smooth, even though the circuit is starting to break up, as Alan Grice mentioned earlier on. There's a fair amount of rubber on the place. We went and had a look around before, and it's not too bad, but as the race nears the halfway point, it's starting to get a little bit of rubber on some spots where the guys wouldn't really want it to be, but Beats is incredibly smooth. You know, he's driving with his head, there's no doubt about that, and Eggenberger's got 4 of the best Group A touring car drivers in the world locked up in his little Texaco team. There's no doubt about that.
Field starting to spread a little at the moment. Still Nisbets in the lead from Piro Revalia. In Soper Dudonne, Bryson Percy, Fury and Seaton, Brock and Parsons, Crow and Richards.
Well, looking at that time, Tony, the Piro car, the time difference back to the leader, they should be able to take full advantage of that during the pit stop by Nisbets to hand over to Ludwig.
Certainly on the way they've been running the pit stops at 35 odd seconds. We'd imagine that they can close up most of that and would certainly take advantage. We'll take a break and...
A routine stop for it. Klaus Ludwig has taken over. Klaus Nisbets is out of the car. Only one small problem, which was that Ludwig tried to start the car just before the fuel had finished going into it. They switched the engine off and everything went routinely.
Thank you, Richard Hay, and that stop took 33.5 seconds, so as he said, a routine stop. Nothing that's going to upset the order at this stage, although Piro was wandering through there fairly close, wasn't he?
Yes, Manuel Piro in the 46 M3 has been able to take the lead. Now, whether or not Klaus Ludwig can pick that up, that's the pit stop. As you can hear,
a little bit of bother starting the car, but nothing major.
Klaus Nisbets, your world championship is looking better and better as this race progresses.
Yeah, that's very important, but we have to be careful with the car. The car runs very well. I have no problem, and I hope we can finish this race. That's important for us.
Are you having problems with the traffic out there at all?
No, I have no problems at all, and I was not so fast. I was a little bit slower than in the practice. I can go maybe 1 second faster, but it is not important now.
So you think we're looking good for a Sierra 1-2?
Yeah, I hope so.
Confident face there of Klaus Nisbets with Ludwig out in the car. He thinks that they've got a second or so in reserve and doesn't think that they were actually on full tilt. And that magnificent 1:29.42 lap that they did in the flying lap to qualify.
well, there's not too much of a gap really between Emanuele Pirro and the number 46 BMW and Klaus Ludwig and the number 7 Ford Texaco Sierra. In fact, you'll be able to see that gap shortly. Glenn Seaton, meantime, is sitting right in behind Ludwig's car. 5.37 seconds is, in fact, the difference. Our BMW team had hoped to go half race distance for one change of driver. Then we expect to see Roberto Revalia take over that car. But at the moment, everything's running smoothly for the Eggenberger Ford team, who on the road are second and third. Pirro, the race leader, in the BMW M3. Second spot is Ludwig, and third is Pierre Dudonne in the second of the Eggenberger Sierras.
So looking at those car numbers, car 46 leads from 7, from 6, from 3, from car 30, from 5, from 53. We gather that Roberto Revalia is ready to get into the car, so that might be a sooner than expected pit stop for the 46 car. And meantime, one of the Volvos is a little off onto the fence. I think it was the Italic Pegan Anderson car.
Good at what? We might have a look at that shortly. That was incredible. That's the Ubix Copier's car. Oh, sorry about the guardrail. But we'll have a look at that again. That happened at Vision Hire Corner.
It is the Anderson Tulloch car, the second of the Volvo cars. See if we can get a look at how it happened.
Just watch the Volvo. It's making a very tidy turn. Two Bimmers jump underneath it. And then all of a sudden he says, which way is the turn? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm off course. Well, there's free parking here on a holiday Monday anyway.
Yeah, a little sudden stop though. I think that was Pegg and Anderson in the car, so their tyres might be running a little tired as well. Limping back. Does the steering still work? It seems to work partially at least. And I bet he'll be hoping that he can get back to the pits.
Slight problem with the front end geometry. Nothing major that a couple of days in the shed couldn't fix.
Looked good from the back.
But you start kissing the guardrail. For a moment there, I thought the second Volvo almost struck it on the way out of the turn, but their race is well and truly over. The biggest problem is going to be to try and get out of the car while the traffic's there. The unfortunate thing is the driver has become frustrated, and that couldn't be on a worse spot of road.
Yeah, very easy to get collected where he's sitting there. I think it's actually Equitalic in the car.
Certainly wouldn't want to go getting out of the driver's door at the moment. I bet it's probably the only time that he wishes he had a right-hand drive car underneath him.
Waiting now while the lead car is expected to come into the pits in the next couple of laps. They certainly are ready down in pit road for them. Emanuele Pirro still leading the race, waiting for Roberto Ravaglia to take over. The order at the moment is Pirro, Ludwig, Giudone, Percy, Seaton, Parsons, Crow, Hansford, and then Higa.
And the 35 car, Andrew Madecki, that car has been pushed away behind the pits and is out of the race. So that's bad luck for Andy Madecki. He's had a wretched run here over the last 3 or 4 days. Meantime, the BMW, driven by Emanuele Pirro, is the current leader, but stalking him is the Sierra.
Just trying to read the hand signals in pit lane. It looks like 3 or 4 laps before 46 does come in. So we'll take a break and be back at the Wellington waterfront in just a few moments, hopefully to get that pit stop. When Emanuele Pirro comes in to hand over to Roberto Ravaglia, and on the track we got the pace car out.
The pace car is out because we will show you.
Not another Volvo incident. The same fella that hit the wall. Inky Tulloch, I think, was at the wheel at the time. He's got the smoky blues there right at the moment, and the car not responding terribly well, as you'd expect.
Well, he's got the wobbles up in Volvo land.
And this could be disaster for the Pirro BMW M3, because if he has to pit while the pace car is out, that means he loses the whole lap.
It's true. I don't think he's been caught in there, Robbie. And he'd be mad to come in, anyone would be mad to come into the pits at the moment, because they've formed them up behind the pace car.
The problem is if Pirro has to come in because he's out of fuel, Mike, he will lose a lap, which he badly can ill afford to do.
Here we go, shades of Bathurst. Has anyone learned anything about what you do when the pace car is out? You certainly don't pit, it would seem.
Well, I'm just looking to see who we in fact have in the pits.
Eager and Longhurst, the change over to Tony Longhurst. They've been caught, so have a look at where they go. To the end of the pit lane, they'll have to wait until the field has gone past before they can come out.
So Longhurst takes over and they go down 1 lap. And that is really cruel, because the Volvo had been...
No, Mike, they've been allowed to go. They're onto the tail end of the pace car field, and they'll be right.
Well, he could be very lucky boy indeed, but in the meantime they're trying to pull the Volvo.
It certainly seems to be luck of the draw, doesn't it?
It is a lucky dip under that situation, and pace cars are somewhat different. There's Roberto Ravaglia, who will take over from Emanuele Pirro in the leading BMW. For touring cars, and FISA adopt, of course, the pace car rule, where while the pace car is out you have to stay in the pits and you drop a lap. In the United States, of course, that's half of the technology, to get into the pits and back out again behind the pace car. They encourage it. And I think I prefer the latter.
Certainly in the early stages of the pace car being used at Bathurst, it really was a debacle, with some drivers thinking that they were doing the right thing coming in the pits and then ending up having to wait until the pace car, which was travelling very slow, had gone round the 6.5 kilometre circuit and having to go out on the end of the field, thereby losing a lap. It hasn't happened in the case of Alfred Heger and Tony Longhurst. Longhurst being allowed out. They all form up behind each other now.
The reason, of course, that we have the pace car out on the racetrack is the Volvo that was on the racing line. Although I must say that earlier in this race, when we had the Gruyard BMW with officials jumping over the fence and ducking cars trying to straighten it out, I thought it was far more serious than this one.
Well, there was never any doubt it was going to be a 4-hour rather than 500 kilometre race, but any doubt that anyone had has been dispelled now. It only needs the pace car out a couple of times before you lose time. It will definitely be a 4-hour race. We started fairly late, so it's going to be around 9 or 10 minutes past 5 when we finish.
And total confusion down in the BMW pit. They were all ready for their scheduled pit stops when the pace car came out, and we saw one of the team managers rush into the pit, get onto the intercom straight away, and started talking to the drivers that were in the car, Emanuele Pero and Annetta Musaven. And right now we have the women driver there, that's Mercedes Sturmans, who's standing waiting to get into her car, and hovering around in the background too, Roberto Revalia, he's also standing around, he's pacing up and down waiting to get into his car, and the crew do not look very happy, and they're listening in on the intercom and they're signalling to each other, waiting to see exactly what's going to happen, pointing up the pit row. I'll just see if we can get over and talk to Roberto. Roberto, what is the situation? Do you have to stay here and wait?
No, I don't know, because now there is pace car, and I don't know if Emanuele comes now. We are not sure if it's possible to go out from the pit. Now we want to check with the ladies' car, and after we decide if Emanuele comes in the pit now.
Are you worried about the fuel?
Yes.
What's the situation? How many more laps can you do out there?
I don't know, but I think there is no big problem, because they go very slowly, and I think he can do again 5-6 laps.
Can your crew handle both cars at the same time?
I hope, yes.
Okay, well, good luck, Roberto Revalia here in the BMW pit, and it sounds like we could be in for a situation where both BMW Schnitzer cars come in at the same time.
And that's not something that they would like to have happen. Obviously, when asked the question if they could cope with both at once, he said yes, they can, very briefly, but obviously that's not the ideal situation. They'll all be prepared there, and there's a little bit of confusion as the pace car is still out on the circuit. The Drink Row Toyota, Alan was driving it first, and he's still sitting in the pits and trapped there by that ruling. While he's in the pits, he's being told he's supposed to turn it off.
I can't believe some of this. This pace car thing has just caught out so many people who should know better. It's unbelievable.
Well, while that's happening, we're having one of the BMs coming into the pits.
Yeah, it's the Revalia changeover. What is it?
No, the girls.
The women.
Do you want me to look at Movison out? Mercedes Sturmans.
And it looks like it is. It's Mercedes Sturmans is getting into the car. The wheels are going on as the BMW team have obviously gambled. They're obviously having a trouble with the fuel, as Roberto Revalia suggested. And I'm just wondering now if they are going to let the number 46 car that was second a few minutes ago come in as well. Mercedes Sturmans is getting her gear on. She's pulling her belts tight. And Ed Museven is out of the car. They're just wiping the screens briefly. Thumbs up everywhere. Team manager at the front says, away you go.
They go back out in 14th place on the track. 14th place for the 47 car. Sturmans and Movison.
It's taking a long time to get that Volvo off the circuit. In Europe, they would have had it back out of their rebuild, probably ready to run again.
And of course, the BMW people have done the dead right thing, because they have now tested the situation. The girls have come in, refueled on the pace lap, and been allowed to join at the end of the field. You'll see Revalia coming in.
Well, that really is a remarkable situation. Under normal circumstances, the car would be made to wait. The reason is because the circuit is so slow and it takes them so long to get down the hairpin, it takes them so long to get round. The crocodile on the end of the field is still only just coming past. They can refuel the car, change all 4 tyres and driver in less than 30 seconds, which is what it takes for the crocodile to pass. So that's good news for Roberto Ravaglia. It's also good news because you're going to see some Commodores in a fairly short space of time. We reckon in the next half an hour, but we'll see.
Thanks, Richard. With the information from down in the pits, and my goodness, as Brian Lawrence said a few minutes ago, so many people have been caught out by these rules and regulations with the World Touring Car Championships, mobile starts and pace cars.
Well, I don't disagree with the pace car, you know, because I've seen so many wrecks on so many racetracks where drivers are forced lap after lap to take evasive action. They really do hold up racing on the line on so many of occasions, but I don't think we're too far off the start. Waiting for the pace car, maybe one more lap around. Now, wait to see whether or not Emanuele Pirro sprints into the pits quickly and jumps back out on the tail of the line.
And of course he didn't do that, Mike, which I think is crazy, because if he had come in this lap and done what his teammates did, he would have actually, in effect, picked up virtually a lap.
The only problem was, though, Robbie, where the pace car pulled out, he was halfway down the field, so he could have easily got caught on the pit exit and made to wait for another lap around.
I see Clark of the course, Robbie Lester, down there in conversation with somebody up until a couple of seconds ago. There was no way they were going to get a start on that lap. They were still waiting on the clearance of the track.
Well, Brocky thinks it's amusing.
I'll bet he does. Okay, we still haven't got a start. We'll be back very shortly in the Wellington waterfront.
Well, they've set him a task at a half. Let me tell you, I think probably if they had set the Muvison trick, the Sturmitz, but he hasn't dropped a lap. He's got a lot of time to make up though.
Very quick stop. Well done. Now back out on the circuit. Roberto Ravaglia with the task ahead of him. A superb driver in any circumstances. Let's see what he can do with this little M3 that was the race leader.
Well, 31's in a slight spot of bother. That's the Volvo parking lot down there, Crash Rail City.
It's the Kane Scott John Sorensen 635. It's the car that John Morton drove to second place here a couple of years ago.
How close was that, Emmanuel? Well, I just got out of the car, so I don't know what's going on. I drove for quite a while, I think an hour and 15 minutes or something like that. It's extremely difficult because offline it's very dirty. The surface is breaking down a bit. So if you make a little mistake, you go a bit offline, or just to overtake the back markers is very difficult. So you want to be really concentrated, and maybe by the end of the race something will change, because it's very difficult to make a mistake.
Correct me if I'm wrong, did you say the track is breaking up?
Yeah, the surface is breaking up a little bit.
All right, what about the fuel situation? How close were you to running out of fuel?
Well, the maximum, this race is 500 kilometers, but you cannot drive over you can't go beyond 4 hours. So I drove 2 hours and 15 minutes without running out of fuel, so there is no problem.
Thank you.
Certainly there's no problem now, having gone past the 2-hour mark. Emanuele Pirro, a happy man, though a tired one, and a very pertinent point he was making that Alan Grice pointed out a little earlier on, that the surface in various parts is starting to break up a little. Drake Sweeper is one place where there is some surface breakup. You get those little marbles, the build-up of rubber coming off the tyres, and the track surface combining with that to lift a little, makes it very, very slippery, like being up on the marbles on the outside of a speedway track. Not the sort of place you want to be, and it requires intense concentration. Just having a look at something that happened just a few moments ago. This was the BMW that we saw, the Sorensen Scott car, and doing exactly the same as we saw a Volvo do 5 laps ago.
They must have magnets in the wall down there. They're pulling them off the streets. However, the race lead still held by Klaus Ludwig and Klaus Niedzwitz. It's a little speculation because of a late pit stop by Alan Grice whether or not he is still holding down second over Roberto Ravaglia and Pirro, then Fury and Seaton, and the Soper Giordano car back to about 4th or 5th spot. clarify that for you, but we've got a good race going here. Well, certainly plenty of traffic manoeuvres with George Fury's number 30 car being driven by Glenn Seaton and Greg Hansford in the Dick Johnson DDB Needham machine. There's Ludwig going through, and the Nissan making a big run here on Greg Hansford as they come up to the next left-hander.
The official lap score will correct itself very shortly. At the moment it's showing Grice and Percy in second place behind Ludwig and Nisvitz. In third place is Revalia, and in fourth place is Seaton, with Soper and Giudone showing down in fifth place. Obviously that yellow flag situation, pace car situation, will confuse things for a little while until the sums are done by the Unisys computer. And within a lap or two, oh, look at David Parsons lifting the inside front, and at one stage with two wheels off the ground through that drag sweeper. He's pushing hard. Rice right behind him, or Percy in the car as it is now.
Well, Witt will carry on. He'll set that pace. They'll run in the maybe the 34s for the remainder of the afternoon. There's another incident to David Parsons in the Peter Brock car, locks up a front brake, then has to turn it very sharply, bicycles, through the left-hander at Drake. That's where Gricey put one backwards into the guardrail a little earlier this afternoon. Inside rear comes off the ground. He manages to hold control of the car, and Percy was sitting right in behind him, and in fact Percy about to put a lap on David Parsons in the Brockmobile number 5.
Certainly Parsons is pushing that number 5 car very, very hard indeed. Percy looking just a little smoother as he does it in a similar car behind him, but about to put a lap on him.
The lead car is now 46 seconds ahead of the M3 BMW. Ravaglia not having to pit again, but of course the Sierra having to pit again. But I think really by the time they do pit, they'll have sufficient lead to be able to maintain it.
Of course, the BMW people well aware that the race is not going to go to 500 Ks and that it will be a 4-hour duration. And they've got past the 2-hour mark quite comfortably on a tank of gas. So they know they've got to sit on steady pace now and try and pick it up just a little in the latter half of the race. They know what the economy of the car is rated at, and they got to 2 hours 15 and hadn't run out of gas. So one imagines they can pick up the pace just a little and push it just a wee bit harder on.
One thing it is going to do is put a lot of pressure on the Eggenberger team to have a flawless pit stop, and they need that to absolutely lock up this race, because the BMW, as Robbie has mentioned, can, if it can just hold station, perhaps just pick up a bit before the pit stop, Roberto Ravaglia could be the man to beat for the checkered flag in the streets of Wellington.
And the Sierras aren't going as fast as they were earlier in the race. As you can see here, they are not falling away from the cars like the Peter Brock car, the Grice car. They are not just falling away like they were before, so their pit stop is going to be real important to them.
The Ludwig car at the moment is lapping it around in the high 35s, low 36s, and the Pierre Dudonne car number 6, 134.8 was its last time. So they've got a little bit of pressure on them. They're starting to drag back that lost time, but I think the chances of a Ford 1-2 here at the moment are just looking a little bit on the remote side.
Of course, all of these calculations become quite irrelevant if we have the pace car out another couple of times during the race, which is quite on the cards with the kind of destruction that's being wrought around this circuit.
A few cars left out there too. I'm surprised, Mike, you mentioned before that while they removed the Volvo from the racetrack, they left the Olivier Grouard car there, and that was in a rather dangerous position. It's one thing that we really don't want to see is a car that's already been damaged and collected once again because it's been left in a dangerous spot.
I reckon they had enough time to re-guardrail the circuit. However, number 7 car continues to lead the Nissan Mobil 500, the 87 edition, on the streets of Wellington. Parsons having a good lick there, and Grice, number 3 car with Win Percy at the wheel, also keeping him extremely honest. They're up on that little black machine again. And I tell you, there's a lot of traffic congestion. Ludwig has managed to break through. Parsons has got a bit of a break at this stage, and Win Percy trying to hold off the Volvo.
at this stage of the race, it's incredible the number of cars that are running and all running strong. It just shows how much development has gone in the last 2 years into these Group A cars, because although it looks like the Sierras and the Grice car are just hauling away, it's not quite as easy as that, and I think the pace is really settling back now, and we're all within about 2 or 3 seconds of each other.
This hour will be the important one in terms of race tactics and going according to plan. Win Percy still as smooth as ever in that Commodore of Alan Grice's. What a superb driver he is. Very experienced and very astute, as one or two of our commentators have pointed out. And being astute is very important in this kind of racing. One of the reasons why Peter Brock has been so successful over the years is the cool head and the thinking brain that tells you how to run a 4-hour race rather than a sprint. Lots of people who can run at top speed for 20 laps or whatever, but it's different tactics.
And all credit to young Parsons. There he is, ahead of the world's top touring car driver, really, in Win Percy. And look at him, he is doing a great job. And bear in mind that last year, poor David put the car into the fence, lost his drive the week later at Pukekohe. Here he is, given the chance again, and he's withstanding that pressure tremendously. Mind you, I don't know how long that's going to happen for, because Win looks like he's getting ready to have a passing manoeuvre any minute now.
Top Kiwis at the moment are Trevor Crowe and Jimmy Richards. Trevor Crowe in the car, I believe, at the moment.
There goes Grice through now. There's Win Percy just gone through on young David. That's what you call pressure from a professional. I still don't detract from David's effort, because I think that Grice car has been quicker all day, but...
And actually, Win Percy doing such a great job, but it's almost a repeat of Peter Brock for the last 2 years. He had problems the first year with the wet when Alan Moffat went into the car, and Moffat was probably 10 seconds off the pace. Last year they had the same problem, and it needs Brock to get back in again for the 3rd year in a row and try and do a big sprint to catch up some ground.
But doesn't Brocky love that?
Doesn't he ever? Amazing when you see the look on his face when he gets in the car for a late-minute sprint. We were talking about the top Kiwis in the 53 car, Jim Richards and Trevor Crowe, driving this, the earlier model of the M3, an ex-JPS car through Frank Gardner in Australia, which Trevor Crowe now runs. Jimmy Richards in it this week, and I think, Robbie, you're going to drive in that next week, haven't you?
I sure have, but just looking there, that looks like Jim's still behind the wheel. I don't think they've come in for a pit stop yet, so that's amazing.
I think he came in earlier this afternoon, but they didn't change drivers, so Jim's getting the best out of that 2 hours plus.
Definitely, they would have topped up the fuel, and so Jim's going to run through and Trevor will have a smaller drive, which is good tactics, because Jim is the fast number 1 in this team, and he's going to put it back up in a good position for Trevor to bring it home.
They are the top Kiwis at the moment. They're in 7th place overall, behind an enormous number of works drivers and teams, and the force and might of the dollars that they can spend.
It's amazing how a small budget team like this can do so well as they're doing. They do it on a small budget, but they're very well organised.
Clever preparation and good clean driving. Meanwhile, our race leader is still Klaus Ludwig in the number 7 car, and here Dudonne in the 6 car with Grice right on his tail. Win Percy in the car at the moment.
I was just thinking, Tony, if you take the internationals out of today's field, and I refer to the Texaco Sierras and the BMW Works team, my goodness me, it has a familiar look to last year. You'd have George Fury, Glenn Seaton leading the race from Peter Brock, Richards and Crowe. It's almost a repeat. The only problem is there's 2 Texaco Sierras and probably 10 M3s that are making the difference here today.
Well, if you want to apply that point, I think if you took away the dollars from the works teams, then what we've been saying is correct, in that touring car driving, touring car racing in this part of the world is as strong as anywhere.
I agree with that. I'll tell you what, we've been watching the Texaco car here, and Grice has been able to get past Parsons. I keep saying Grice, I mean Win Percy, of course. That's Pierre Dudonne in the Texaco number 6 car, but just look at the way that Win Percy has been hauling him in.
That's what I've been saying since the Texaco cars have pitted and their co-drivers have got in. They just don't seem to be running the pace they were early on, and I would say that if Win wanted to push the car, he could just about take the position from that front car.
You don't think that Rudy's done a tutor on the computer?
He might be saving him a little.
There's all sorts of stories about the onboard engine management system on Rudy Eckenberger's cars. I reckon he can almost dial up the local Pizza Hut on them. Meanwhile, the Mobil number 10 machine is in. David Oxton is out of the car. Should be Neil Crompton going in.
See there where they pulled off the spoiler that was awry. Crompton out, Oxton in.
Yep, they were running 14th on the road. Just ahead of them, the girls, Mercedes Sturmitz and Annette Meverson. So, David Oxton rejoins the field in car number 10. About to put a lap on him, Glenn Seaton. Car number 30, co-driving today with George Fury and finding the inside run up here in the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline.
So the position in the Nissan Mobil 500 with just on an hour and 35 minutes to run is Ludwig and Niedzwitz in the lead. Grice and Percy at the wheel in second place. Rivalia at the wheel of the first of the M3s, having made its pit stop. In fourth place, George Fury and Glenn Seaton. Seaton at the wheel at the moment in the Nissan Skyline Turbo. The early leaders, Steve Soper in the Ford Sierra Cosworth, the second of the Eggenberger Sierra cars, back in fifth place, and Peter Brock with young David Parsons at the wheel hanging in there in sixth place. Back on through the field, Trevor Crowe and Jim Richards in seventh place in a BMW M3. The former JPS car from Australia, Dick Johnson, and Greg Hansford in the Dick Johnson Shell Ultra. Car number 17 in 8th place, and Hager and Longhurst in another BMW M3, car number 41, currently sitting in 9th place. So dramas are plenty in the last half hour or so here at the Nissan Mobil 500, with the pace car having to come onto the track, pit stops having been made, but it's still, they go through till 5:15, an hour and a half to go, and it's the Eggenberger Sierra car number 7. Klaus Ludwig at the wheel at the moment. Klaus Niedzwitz was the starting driver. They've made their first pit stop. They probably have one more pit stop to do. But the BMW M3 car 46 in the hands of Emanuele Pirro to start. Now with Roberto Rivalia at the wheel, still in with a very good chance, because we suspect they won't need to pit again. That means the M3 could be the car to come up and win this race, even though it's only in third place at the moment. There's the leading car, car number 7. It's Wynne Percy at the wheel of car number 3, the Chickadee Commodore in second place. And then the Roberto Rivalia M3, car 46 in third place at the moment, as we rejoin Tony Palmer and Mike Raymond and the other commentators.
Thank you, Mike. Still Klaus Ludwig. And as Peter has pointed out, it may come down to pit stops in the end. We've just had confirmed that the Toyota Celica number 72 of Smith & Riley has retired from the field. Makes quite a few out of the race so far, but not the same attrition rate yet as we had. 14 finishes of 43 starters in last year's race. Brian Lawrence just watching Wynne Percy. He really is so smooth. He's getting that car around at excellent pace.
He's doing an absolute superb job. When you compare, with all due respect, to the way in which Alan Grice started the race, as we commented in the opening stages, that he seemed to be tossing the car around. Obviously, with a full load of fuel, wasn't making Grice's job any easier, but Percy is just so smooth. He's like the Waterbury watch. Looking at the in the Texaco pit at the moment, the car number 7, the Klaus Niedzwitz car, lapping at around 134.7, and I think that vibration that Steve Soper spoke about earlier on is still persisting within the car, because they're almost 2 seconds a lap slower. So there is obviously a problem with car 6, even though at this point it doesn't appear to be that serious. They're down and around about 5th position, but certainly not making up too much ground at the moment. But hats off to Wynne Percy. He's doing a wonderful job out there in the Bob Jane T-Mart Chickadee Commodore.
And slipping past Soper a few laps ago, Robbie Francevic, this is the stage in the race where it's been on for a while. You've been around the circuit long enough. You know your way around. It's just keeping that concentration.
It sure is, and this is the time when you do lose your concentration. The lead car is only 28 seconds ahead of Wynne Percy. Likewise, it's only 57 seconds ahead of the third-placed BMW. So in the last half hour, the Percy car has actually picked up time on the leader, and the leader has only pulled out another 10 seconds on the third-place car. bear in mind the Sierra has to come in and pit again. Admittedly, the Commodore does also, but it's looking to be like a very, very interesting finish.
Roberto Revelia not needing to pit again. They went past the 2 hours 15 on 1 tank of gas. Theoretically, they won't need another pit. He can keep there and keep lapping at this sort of speed the duration of the race. What it will come down to is just how long it takes the Eggenberger crew to complete a pit stop, change tyres to fill up with gas. The order at the moment is still Ludwig, from Percy, from Revelia, from Seaton, from Soper, from Parsons, from Richards and Longhurst. Okay, let's just... Oh, there's a problem there for the second Brock car. It's David Oxton in it. David Oxton looks to have a problem with the front right there. We know they had a little ding earlier on, and that's why there's no front spoiler on it. Wonder whether or not he can get around to the pits again. Obviously the smoky tyres there. I know they had a problem yesterday, as we have another car in the pits here. Hopping out of that car at the moment. Trevor Crowe with the TC on the helmet getting in. Richards out.
No problems with that pit stop. Routine pit stop. That car's going to now run through to the finish.
Just putting
Here
a time
comes
on
the
it.
Commodore with the smoke pouring out, getting worse. I think this would be a hard time for David, because he's got to try to nurse that car back to the pits and keep out of everyone's way. But here he is into the pit road, heading for the pit.
It looked initially, Robbie, as though he had tyres rubbing there, but I don't think it is. It may be a repeat of the problem they had yesterday, where the power steering feed broke and leaked down onto the front pipe, and smoke everywhere. Often difficult to see where the smoke is coming from on this, but let's see what they do in this pit stop. They're going to change rubber, obviously. Dave Oxton won't be terribly happy. The car was slightly damaged when he got it. Crew putting gas in, topping it up. Tyres going on.
They don't seem to be working on any other part of the car, so maybe it was a tyre rubbing on the body. No, they're looking under there now.
Let's just have a look at what happened to that car. David Oxton at the wheel, no one else around. He's under brakes there. He lifts the wheel. Well, he had a little bit of a lock-up, but I don't think that was the problem. I think it might be some oil on the rear tyres there. Certainly she's smoking. And Oxton's a fairly cautious man. He would know if there's something wrong with the car, then it becomes obvious fairly quickly. He's mechanically very sympathetic. Talking to Brock now. Steve Boss, Graham Brown had his head in the window a little while ago. We'll see if we can get an update from our pits reporters in just a few minutes on what the problem was. That's Oxton trying to get back out again. The car's not running.
And that is definitely a problem there, because when he went through the left-hander, all the smoke seemed to be transferring from the left to the right-hand side, and yet by the time he arrived back into the pits, it was just absolutely pouring out of the left-hand side.
Let's go down and see if we can get a word in the pits while they struggle with that Commodore, with somebody who's just come in, has been out for an awfully long time, Jimmy Richards.
Jimmy, is there a second pit stop? What was the reason for the first little one?
It shredded a front tyre, and we had to come in and put some harder tyres on.
There's been a lot of drama out there, but you seem to have kept very clean.
Yes, we had a few sort of close shaves with cars bouncing off fences and that, but no, we've had no problem so far.
But somebody was saying the track is breaking up in places. Did you find that?
Oh yes, there's a little bit of tar seal sort of flicked off towards the edge of the track, but that's only normal on a road circuit. It's not breaking up any worry to anybody, I don't think.
How do you look now for a finish?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't even know where we're coming.
Okay, we'll let our people upstairs tell you all about it. Back to you, Tony.
And in fact, where they're coming at the moment is 8th on the official printout. Crowe and Richards, the top Kiwis of the moment. Leader at the moment is Klaus Ludwig still from Win Percy, from Roberto Revelia, from Glenn Seaton, from Dieudonné, from Parsons, from Longhurst, from Crowe. Behind them is Kent Bagent in the Bagent Bowkit Nissan Skyline Turbo.
Klaus is in started to step the pace up again in the lead car. They've now extended their lead to over 30 seconds on the second car and over a minute on car 46. Their lap times have dropped to 33s, back to their fast times early in the race. So obviously Rudy has said, let's get a bigger break on the field and let's get into it. And they're starting to push this lead car again. Still looking very smooth on the circuit, however. It's incredible how these Sierras, you don't see them jumping and bouncing around like the Commodores. And although it looks like he is driving on a Sunday race, he is really getting into that car at the moment. His time is coming down rapidly.
What time is he sitting on there, Robbie?
He's doing 33s now, and he's been doing 34s and 35s. They've come down a second and a half. I think they're just about ready to break into 32s in this lead car.
Well, Rudy Eggenberg is a Swiss, and the team seems to operate like a Swiss watch.
I think he might have just twisted that knob in the pins a little.
It's almost like that, isn't it? It's almost like remote control. They do have radio telephone contact, of course, and it seems that that's the way the team works. They turtle around on 34s or 35s, and then they just wind up the wick and disappear for a while. Let's go down to the pits and have a word with David Oxton, who's down there with our pits reporter.
David, exactly what happened there?
We're not sure yet, but we think it's support arm for the rear axle. It's just pulled right out of the body.
Did that damage at the front alter the handling of the car?
No, it felt fine. It was just coming in nicely. The tyres were coming in good. No, I didn't find a problem with that.
The boss over here, Peter, how are you looking at the moment?
I think we're looking pretty good, really. I think the pace car situation didn't hurt us. What can I say? I'm looking at the lap times at the moment. It's a bit slow, 39, 38. We should be doing 34. Maybe there's a bit of traffic out there. We just see that from David's car there, what can happen in this race. I mean, it's a rough and tough circuit.
You're still looking good for that 3 in a row, or do you think you might be having to take a third place here?
Oh, no, gee whiz. I mean, here we are sort of funneling around there pretty close to the mark. It's still a lot of racing to go yet.
Peter Brock, for the first time this weekend, looking less than super confident, knowing that one car is really out of contention in terms of being a support car to him. So he rests everything on the 5 car now, and they're a little ways down on this man leading the race, Klaus Ludwig, who's now pulled out to about 32 seconds in the lead. It's amazing just how quickly they can wind up and just pull out a few seconds at a time. Let's go back and have a look at what happened to Trevor Crowe in the 53 car just a couple of minutes ago. Having had such an excellent run with Jimmy Richards in the car for so long. Looking now at Trevor Crowe in that 53 car at the bottom of your picture. Trying to get around the corner. The M3 works car in front of him, and he almost does exactly the same. It's the same place.
I tell you, they've got magnets in the wall there.
They must
obviously
have.
what's happening is the faster cars are crashing through on that inside, and the driver's getting past and not seeing them. And they're just not slowing down sufficient to get their apex back.
Amazing how many of them have missed that apex, and you're right, Robbie, on each occasion there has been somebody flying down the inside, but I guess that's the story of keeping your eye on the mirrors.
But of course you could see it with Trevor, who's a better driver than the ones that have put it into the wall. He saw it coming, saw it all happening, and did actually slow down sufficient to get around.
Steve Soper and Pierre Dudonné, in fact, driving car number 6 at the moment, back in 5th place. And David Parsons driving the Peter Brock 05 Commodore, 2 laps down and 3 minutes and 5 seconds behind the leading car at the moment. And in 7th place, it's the Hager Longhurst BMW M3, 2 laps down. Ratzenberger at the hands of the other BMW M3 from the BMW Motorsport team in car number 40. And Dick Johnson and Greg Hansford rounding out the top 9 at the moment.
Looks like the Peter Brock number 05 car is back out on the racetrack again. Brock, of course, said earlier so much could happen in this race, but I think he has seen the lap times increased from David Parsons, and that hasn't been the best of signs. Now Brock is back to what he's had to do here for the last 2 years. That's jump in and pick the pace up. He's sitting in behind Baron von Lois at the moment in the BMW M3. goes past him without any problem whatsoever. He comes up behind the number 6 car with Pierre Dieudonné at the wheel. And in fact, Neil Crompton, being out of the race, drops the Brock car count back to 1 for this event. And our lap score, of course, showing Klaus Ludwig, the race leader, from Win Percy, Roberto Ravaglia, Glenn Seaton and Steve Soper, Pierre Dieudonné. And that is a current situation that Rudy Eggenberger's team is protesting vigorously about. They do believe they are up higher than that, and they are knocked down a lap. And Richard Hay is on his way to the pits to talk to Rudy Eggenberger or some of these people about where they think they're placed.
David Parsons out of the car. Peter Brock mentioned in an interview just a few moments ago that the lap times were creeping up a little high. He looked concerned when he saw one turned in at 1:38, so he's gone out to pull up his end of the remaining car.
Let's now check some of the highlights from the last hour of the Nissan Mobil 500. And it began with Gianfranco Brancatelli having a little brush with the wall. Let's go to those highlights now as we look back at action from the last 60 minutes or so. Gianfranco Brancatelli having a little brush with the wall there. Meanwhile, Steve Soper, the early leader in car number 6, had a bit of trouble with a tail-ended Toyota. But Soper managed to get out of it all right. The Toyota not in such good nick. At the halfway stage, the first pit change, the first driver change for the car number 7, Klaus Nietsbitz, handing over to Klaus Ludwig. Meanwhile, the Volvos continued to have their problems this afternoon. Per Gunnar Anderson didn't quite get around that tight left-hander, and it led to all sorts of problems not long after for the Volvo cars. They tried to restart the car. In fact, they were successful in getting it restarted, but things were not good up around the front axle area. And as a consequence, they had to bring out the pace car, and that slowed down the whole field. As we look again from the front of that particular Volvo Turbo, car number 4, smoke coming out of that front axle area. Robbie Lester had to come out in the pace car, and the whole field slowing right down. Controversy, confusion when the pace car came out. Confusion in the pits. The BMW M3 team, the car that was in second place at the time, needed a driver change. That's car number 46, Manuele Pirro. And Roberto Ravaglia finally made their pit change just after the pace car had left the track, and they are currently running in third place. Let's go down to Richard Hay to get the latest situation from Steve Soper in the pits.
Well, now there seems to be a little bit of confusion on the lap scoring times of the Eggenberger team. Steve Soper, they believe, I think, that you're in 6th place. Do you believe different to that?
Yeah, unfortunately, the official timers, I've got a sheet here in front of me, seem to have lost us 2 laps somewhere, which we don't agree with. But I've just been to the officials and they say it's only provisional and they're not very happy with it either, so they're looking into it. So let's hope soon it's sorted out.
So they agree with you then at the moment, more or less?
They certainly agree that there's something not quite right, yes.
Outside of that, are there any problems at all with either of the 2 Texaco Sierras?
No, none at all.
Okay, great. So that puts Steve Soper then, in theory, if he's right and the Eggenberger team are right, back into 2nd or 3rd position.
Well, I think the present situation won't change, and that is the Klaus Ludwig is leading this race. Whether Bryce Percy is 2nd remains to be seen. Maybe Ravaglia 2nd and Soper 3rd, but placings at the moment are provisional.
It did seem to me they dropped awfully quickly.
Yes, but I don't know if they dropped 2 laps, unless someone went for a Tosca over the backside of the course we didn't find out about.
You know, I meant they dropped on the results fairly quickly, more so than they appeared to have done on the track, and I can't see 2 laps myself.
No.
To change the subject somewhat, the lead car is destined to come in and refuel, of course, but Klaus Ludwig is to stay in the car as per the team. However, this circuit has been so demanding on drivers, as you saw Peter Brock in a lot of the cars. It'll be interesting to see if when he comes in, he gets out of the car, because if he feels
that physically he can't handle another hour and a half of hard driving, he will hand back over, and that will really show how hard this circuit really is.
Well, there's Ludwig giving the Mustang driver a wave out the window about watching your mirrors. While that's happening, just have a look at Glenn Seaton coming up behind Klaus Ludwig in the number 30 car. He has been the steady improver in the second half of this race, make no mistake about that. We'll be able to compare the Ford Texaco Sierra and the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline. The Sierra should get away down Journalist Key, but Seaton has been blindingly fast around the dock area today.
Certainly he's a man we've talked about to some extent this weekend. You'll notice his name is not on the side of that car. He hopped in when his car disappeared out the back of the pit lane. He's only 22 years old, a young Australian who really does have a huge future in this sport, learning at the hands of his father, Bo Seaton, who was the team boss for a long time. And he got a start very early on at, what, 15, 16 years of age, Mike, I think.
Yes, he started in karting and was a state karting champion. When the Peter Jackson Nissan team was formed, they decided to give young Glenn a good go. That's the man who is lead driver. Now they have co-lead drivers in the team, so to speak. Georgie Fury and Glenn Seaton. His dad, Bo Seaton, a former Bathurst James Hardy winner, and is the engine man for the PJ Nissan team. Glenn works, I believe, on a salary just as a mechanic with the team, helping his dad, and has expanded from being a wrench man to a wheel man. I tell you what, must be a dab hand with a wrench, because behind the wheel he's a super kid who's going to go a long way in touring car racing and has matured just so much in the last 12 months.
Too, Mike, in this the touring car world has really been the domain, both in NASCAR in America and in touring cars in Australia and New Zealand, of the 45 or 40 anyway plus age gentlemen who seem to have the maturity to keep it on the track. Somebody else stopped there as we just went past. But young Glenn Seaton is one of the bright young stars. It's the Johnson Hansford car, and looks like the death knell.
Well, it couldn't go any worse today for the Johnson Shell DDB Needham team. They've had a very bad weekend, although I must say this, they were running quite strongly as Dick parks the car. They were running 9th on the road. Greg Hansford had done a driver spell,
which puts the Bajan Bowkett car up another place.
It's just mobile. Maybe it's been struck with that horrible diff failure that seems to have been the Achilles of the Cosworths over the last few weeks. Johnson creeping along on probably one of the slower parts of the circuit. There's not a great deal of room for anybody to get by him.
Well, this is Rudy Eggenberger, of course, playing around with his little game down here with his lap score.
Most of these top teams have their own lap scoring system, and if you go down to any of the majors, you'll find that they can give you a printout of where everybody is, or the 20 people around them at any given point in the race. Certainly it wouldn't be the first time there's been an argument with official scoring and other people's scoring, but they can't see where they've lost 2 laps, and they're checking back over every lap. It will count out right from the start every lap, and some of them virtually every gear change as well. And drivers these days can't afford to rest on their laurels or their reputation, because there's little printouts that tell of every mistake.
Well, apparently the problem seems to be that with car number 6, the Steve Soper Pierre Dudonne Cosworth, that the problem occurred during the pace lap that was going on for the 4 or 5 odd laps that they were out there, and that seems to be where the problem is. So Rudy Eggenberger, again, the master tactician. There's a tremendous amount at stake when you're talking World Group A Touring Car Championship stuff. There's no stone can go unturned.
Look at that little printout he's getting there. They will now go back, both the officials and the teams, and they'll go through every lap, including the pace car laps, and see if they can find where the discrepancy is. So at the moment, that placing for Steve Soper is very much provisional. It's Klaus Ludwig. Continues in the car, still on good pace. What phenomenal motor cars they have been. Absolutely adjustable in every form in the suspension. So good crew members, good mechanics, in combination with the driver's information, are able to set these cars up absolutely perfectly for any given circuit, even a rough and bumpy street circuit that's as tight as this one.
full credit must go to these drivers as well, Tony. The lead car hasn't, got one mark on it. The car number 6, the Soper car, has got a little bit of a dent on the left front guard, but the lead car is virtually unmarked. The attrition rate has been rather high here, although perhaps not as high as last year, and there's some pretty second-hand cars out there on the circuit at the moment, but the Texaco car, absolutely immaculate.
Well, I think that's the difference between the professionals and these guys, the two Klausers here, Ludwig and Niedzwitz, and of course Steve Soper and Pierre Dieudonné. They're not into banging cars up. If they were, they'd be replaced immediately. They are full-time professionals, but their cars have had starts in Australia, 2 races there and here, not even a dent in the car. And this is probably the most difficult of courses for them. There's concrete one side, you've got Armco the other.
About 65 minutes of the race to go. The Nissan Mobil 500 live from the Wellington waterfront, and car number 7, Klaus Niedzwitz, was the lead driver. Klaus Ludwig at the wheel at the moment. They are the leaders from Grice and Percy get later into the afternoon here on the Wellington waterfront, but certainly the action is very hot on the track. It's Klaus Ludwig in the Eggenberger Texaco Sierra, car number 7, which leads the race at the moment, but they've got another pit stop to go.
It's wall-to-wall BMW.
Mercedes Stemmitz, 46. That's Rebelli, but car 47, Stemmitz and Annette Moiverson.
We're seeing some dazzling racing here from the BMWs. 46 also going through quickly there. The driver that everyone believes. Presently second on the road, and that is, of course, Roberto Bulvalia. Although Win Percy and Alan Grice show us second. There's some slight discrepancy on the lap scoring. That'll resolve itself hopefully before the end of the race. And we expect the Win Percy Alan Grice Commodore into the pits for a pit stop in about 2 laps time.
Dick Johnson, another miserable day. What's happened to your car first?
Well, actually, it broke a little drive shaft that comes out of the side of the diff. It's just a common problem with them, I think.
You've lost the other car as well?
Yeah, well, it's broken a differential itself, so it's they're all the same problem, related in the same area.
Is this the same problem you had at Bathurst too?
Well, at Bathurst, mine blew a diff, but it blew the whole side out of the diff. But today, all we've done is just broke a little half shaft.
It's a long way to come for an expensive mistake like that, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's a long way to come and have an expensive mistake like that.
I think it's in keeping with the rest of the year I've had. I think what we'll do is go home, lick our wounds and see if we can resurrect something for next year.
Dick Johnson, as we watch the pit stop for the Alan Grice and Win Percy car. Win Percy coming in. Will he get out? Or will he stay in? I think Alan Grice will be back out there, although Percy seems to have been, from our point of view anyway, the smoother of the two. The news at the moment, by the way, is that Steve Soper has been reinstated to second place. In the official resulting, we have the Texaco Sierras back to 1-2 as we watch this pit stop with Grice getting in. There's a little bit of a delay there.
Percy jumped out and went round the side of the car. Which is great, except Percy's doing a bit of supervising as well. Grice standing in the background doesn't know what to make of all this. Nope. The race for Alan Grice and Win Percy might well be over.
It's a bit of a shambles down there at the moment.
Seemed to be a simple case of one out, one in, but they're both out. And the car seems to be out. Staying this long in the pits, obviously it's a substantial problem. I wonder whether Win Percy has figured out there was a problem. They were coming down in pace, so the lap times were going up. We'll see if we can get a word with Win Percy or with Alan Grice in a little while, but that may be one of those engine or transmission problems that just don't go away and you can't really fix.
Beautiful shots of the tail. Let's go to Richard Hay.
The problem with the Alan Grice car at the moment, I just spoke to Win Percy, who's fairly hot and bothered at the moment. All he needs is a drink. But the problem with the car is a rear axle problem, he thinks. He said there's a bad vibration from the back of the car. They've got problems there. And it looks very much as though the race is going to be run for the number 3 Chickadee Commodore.
Thank you, Richard. Hay in the pits. We told you a few moments ago that Steve Soper has been reinstated to second place. The challenge from the Grice and Percy car has melted. As you see them looking with disdain at the rear axle area of the car. Not something that can be fixed quickly enough to get them back out on the pace and back in the race realistically. So the order at the moment is Klaus Ludwig from Dieudonné, from Revelia, from Seaton. Grice and Percy were featuring there. So we go back to Brock, and then Longhurst, then Ratzenberger, and then the Crosby Sprague car.
I've seen they've adjusted the second of the Sierras. They might have to do another adjustment later. That might well be Roberto Revelia, who I would think might be closer to second than Steve Soper and Pierre Dieudonné. That's all speculation. Don't want to throw any more red herrings in, but keeping in mind the two Texaco cars, we believe in for another pit stop, or will be in for another pit stop, whereas Revelia will be able to go all the way to the wire.
Well, he's putting in some very consistent times. For the last 10 or 11 laps we've been watching, he's been around the 134.2 to 134.8 bracket. Continually, they've given him the pit board that he's minus 16 seconds. As far as the Texaco car is concerned, they're running in 35.5, somewhere around about there. So he's definitely picking up time. There's no doubt about it. He's a very neat and tidy man behind the wheel of a motor car, and I think he's on for a higher placing than where he's running on the road at the moment.
We'll get a look in a few minutes, if we can, at a lap or two with Peter Brock as we watch Klaus Ludwig in the 7 car in the lead of the race quite substantially at the moment. But Peter Brock, since he went back out, has been picking up the pace. He's not realistically going to catch either of these Texaco Sierra Fords unless they have a breakage of some kind, and certainly no shortage of people around the pits for the duration of the weekend prepared to pick them as having transmission problems. None of them have eventuated yet, I suspect, because they're running well within the limits of what the car will do. We saw in the flying lap yesterday they could go under 130 with 129s, both of them, and both drivers said that they could have gone to 128 if it was necessary.
Well, they've just given Soper now 135.3 and given him a plus 3 seconds on the board, and looking at Revalia's pit, he's down to a 33.9, so he's really starting to drag some time back in now, and he's got plenty of time to do it. He's got another hour or so. The car's looking very good on the road, mind you, so is the Sierra. There's nothing wrong with that, no marks on either of these cars, but I think that without a doubt that Revelia is certainly making a charge for the flag.
Brian, I wonder how much of Steve Soper's time's going up and up like that is just a little bit of caution. They certainly need to finish, don't they?
Yes, probably. You know, it's very easy to sort of form your own opinion from the side of it, but you know, we're dealing with two of the best teams in the world here, and you're quite right. Maybe he's just taking 5 and being a little bit easier on the car. He's got a little bit of a buffer up there. The lead car at the moment, 134.7, and he's getting a plus 72nd board. So, you know, they do have a little bit of time up their sleeve, even though there is 60 minutes to go.
Klaus Ludwig down to the Air New Zealand hairpin. Comfortably in front. Roberto Revelia with it all to do. Steve Soper, Dieudonné reinstated to second.
What must be so demoralising for the other drivers is watching just how easily they appear to be doing it.
That would put the Glenn Seaton George Fury car, I would think, back into 4th spot, Peter Brock being 5th, Longhurst and Hager in 6th, Ratzenberger, Osterreich in 7th, Crosby Sprague 8th, Bagent Bauquet in 9th spot, and the 2 young ladies, Mercedes Sturmans and Annette Muvison, in 10th.
I think it's a very commendable effort coming from those girls. What was originally put through the media that BMW had hooked them on there to get some publicity, pretty much like the Peter Brock, Neil Crompton saga, but there's no doubt about it. They've got there on merit. They drove absolutely brilliantly at Calder Park a couple of weeks ago to finish in 7th, and you know, it's a long race and they've just been out there pacing themselves, staying out of trouble.
Going down those positions, out of 4th is Revelia, Brock, and then Longhurst. 6th place in the M3, 7th place Ratzenberger, then Crosby and Sprague, Grice and Percy still appearing on the schedule, but not really competing at the moment. In 10th place, the two women drivers in the M3, Grice and Percy, then Radicic and Finau doing extremely well in 325 BMW. In 13th place, Von Lewis and Von Bayern in the M3. Perkins and Holm in the Commodore in 14th place. In 15th, O'Brien, Hyde and Richards. Richards, the cross entry, of course. 16th, Blomqvist and Grunberg. They've had their sagas today as well in the Volvo. 17th, Sorensen and Scott in the BMW 635. Johnson and Hansford and Sierra Cosworth still holding down 18th position.
M3 car 46 in the hands of Roberto Ravaglia could yet be the dark horse. It doesn't have to make another pit stop. The Sierra Cosworths do have to make another stop, we believe. All right, let's now rejoin our commentary team.
Thanks, Peter. And having joined us in the commentary box is Neil Crompton. There's the boss out there in number 5 car. A bit of hassle today with the other car.
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate really, Tony. We were sort of charging along okay. We had a few small problems, but no real great drama. And just after I came in, which I think was about 2 hours and 15 minutes into the race, David Oxton got on board and I think only got about half a dozen laps out of the car, and unfortunately something failed at the rear of the car, and I'm not really sure exactly what it was. And there she sits.
Looking at Peter Brock out there, I noticed when we were having an interview with him just 10 or 12 laps ago before he got into the car, he was watching the lap times going up and up with David Parsons and looking a little concerned as they crept up into the 38s and decided to get back in the car himself. It's a situation he enjoys.
Yeah, I just had a look at his lap chart before I popped up, Tony, and it really is quite remarkable how hard Peter drives these races. Because I unfortunately had a touch with Neville Crichton in the opening lap, I came in probably 40 odd minutes into the race, which meant they topped my fuel up and gave me new rubber, so I ended up with an extended session in the car of just over 2 hours. And I'll tell you what, it makes you feel pretty second-hand. And Brock just seems to be so race fit. He's strong in the car. He was about, I think, 2, maybe 3 seconds on occasions quicker than David. And he's charged up and seems to be going quite well. In fact, in 5th position, we believe down a lap on the Fury Seaton Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline, so real interest there for Australasians.
Looking at the Wellington Waterfront race, Peter Brock has done this on 2 separate occasions. He looks uncompetitive, and then all of a sudden he gets in the car, gets fired up, and it is absolutely amazing what he can do with this Holden Commodore. I guess no one knows one better.
Well, he's been rushing around in 33s and 34s, and they're pretty flash times at this time of the day. The car seems to be working very, very well, and there he's dicing with one of the Texaco Sierras. That's car 6.
And Dudonne in there, having been reinstated to 2nd place. Ravaglia in 3rd place in the BMW 46 car at the moment. And Ravaglia, as you've heard from Peter Williams, does not need another pit stop. A point that Robbie Francevic made a little earlier on was it'll be intriguing to see when the Texaco Sierras come in if they do in fact change drivers. It's not intended that they should, but the drivers could be so, shall we say, exhausted by the warmth out there and the pace of the race that they will change over.
One of the things I might mention was while we were in our break there, Tony, there was a 24.5-second stop made by the Fury Seaton car, and George Fury now back in the car. So they're back with Brock. But Dudonne working pretty hard here to tag Peter as they go up to this very fast left-hand hairpin that seems to go on forever. And it's very, very greasy now. There's a lot of rubber and a lot of oil on the outside of the circuit, and there's that BMW that went off very early.
The Sierras will be coming into the pits in 3 to 5 laps, we're told by Mr. Eggenberger and his team. But let me tell you something else. They will change drivers, and the reason for that is the fatigue and so on in the heat here. Also, Steve Soper has just been putting sticky tape on the inside of his hands. Klaus Niedzwitz has done the same. The reason for that is because they're suffering from blisters.
And just as you say that, Neil Crompton shows me the palm of his hand, and it certainly is very blistered up. A lot harder than you can possibly describe from up here. Just how difficult it is to get around this Wellington waterfront circuit with a number of gear changes involved, and just how tight and twisty this circuit is. You've certainly got to be on the ball and very, very fit indeed to last the distance in a race like this. Brian Lawrence looking at the way these Sierras are going, all those hopes that people had of fading transmissions seem to be going out the window.
That's for sure. They've had an incredible run as far as reliability has been concerned. You know, we've seen Andrew Medicki and Phil Mira have problems with their car for Thursday, Friday, and you know, yesterday and today. We've seen Dick Johnson for the last, well, as he said, for most of the season having his on and offers. There's Gricey back in the Chickadee Commodore again. They've repaired the axle. Lee Small on the job. We saw the axle, it just sort of broke the edge off it. They're back in 10th position at the moment, and I think we're really going to see the fire come from the former Sydney pastry cook and last year's James Hardy 1000 winner. Gricey's always a man that rises to the challenge. The car obviously very healthy, very strong, apart from the broken axle, and he's back on the job again. But these Sierras, there's no way this Wellington Waterfront's going to topple them at the moment, although they've still got a way to go, and to finish first you must finish.
We'll check on the times while we're talking about the leaders that these fellows are chasing. The last lap time was a 33 as he comes in the pits. We'll have a look at the driver changeover. Steve Soper and Pierre Dudonné running this car. Steve Soper, we imagine, will be ready and waiting and willing to do fast times. He's taped up his hands.
Dudonné then getting out of the car, Steve Soper getting in blisters and all. You can see there the frantic action to try and do up the belts. Neil Crompton would know all about that. Trying to do up the belts, never fuel. There's not as much fuel to go in because there's not so long to the end of the race now. We're only 3/4 of an hour away from the end of the race, so the stop's quicker in theory. Slight delay in starting the car, out he goes. And Steve Soper then now at the wheel of car number 6.
So there should be Revelia up to second place behind Ludwig.
Yeah, that was him that just went through. That was a pretty healthy stop by the Texaco team, and Richard raised an interesting point that I think both the Peter Jackson car, probably this BMW and also the Mobil car, are in actual fact lapping a bit quicker than the Texaco Sierras, and recent lap times there all around the 34s, 35s on average. They popped in a very good 33.99.
Yeah, I just wondered about that last time recorded there at 33.99 if they decided to go blasting for a little while, since the transmission seems to be holding.
Although now that the Texaco car's had its pit stop, I think it's curtains for the 46 car. I think you'll find that Steve Soper had a softer compound tyre fitted to his car for the last 45-minute stint, and you'll see the times drop right back down to the 32s and 33s. He'll pick up the 46 car and be back in front in no time.
We'll try and get a check on that, Robbie, as we get a time. Looking at Pierre Dudonné, the 40-year-old journalist come racing driver, looking very tired and rather hot.
Pretty hot work out there, mate.
It was okay. I tried to find a conservative pace because we are controlling the race compared to the BMW, and also we have a slight vibration, and I think that's the reason why Steve dropped off from close in the first stint.
The vibration's still there then?
Yeah, it's about constant vibration in the car, but I don't think it's too bad.
Now Steve was also telling me, and he was strapping to his hands sticky tape because of the blisters. Have you found it hard work in that respect?
No, you know, I'm strong like a bull. Steve is a very, very strong driver, but he has weak hands for some reason. But I have strong hands.
A 1-2 for the Eggenberger Sierra team looks to be on the cards though, doesn't it now?
Well, I'm just out of the car and I don't know exactly the overall position, but so far it's looked good, yes.
Pierre Dudonné is quite confident, but looking at that car, Neil Crompton, it's losing gas. I wonder if they've got an airlock there somewhere.
Well, they've got 120 litres on board now, having just thrown in a couple of churns, and there it is. I'm not familiar with the rear end of the Sierra, but that might be coming out the vent seal. Probably won't be a problem, but you know, you don't want anything going wrong with the motor car at this end of the race. They're really in the wind down phase, and once they lose a little bit of gas and burn a bit off, that probably won't be a problem.
Certainly going to make life a little slippery for people following.
Yeah, well, and I don't think it could be much slipperier. There's certainly some hairy spots out there.
Wow, it's quite a good tactic.
Well, why not? A bit of Texaco here and there.
Some of the sponsors' product being spread onto the track. Don't think it's enough at the moment to be a real danger. And as Neil says, when they burn off a little bit of gas and get rid of some of that out of the breather, it should settle down a bit. We'll keep an eye on it.
They really have, I think, amazed everybody today, Tony, with their pace. We presumed the situation would be much the same as it was at Bathurst and perhaps Calder, where they raced substantially slower than they qualified, but they've managed to maintain those 33s and 34s.
So the updated situation is that Klaus Ludwig at the wheel of the Ford Sierra Cosworth, the Eggenberger Texaco car number 7 is still in the lead with one pit stop to make, and that pit stop coming up very soon. 1 minute and 1 second down. Roberto Ravaglia in car minute in this car as well, and we believe that Bajan is the driver at the moment. Let's go down to John Cardwell in the pits.
Okay, as you watch now, you can see Graham Crosby standing by to get into the second of the Team Nissan Racing New Zealand cars. They're waiting for their changeover, and with me now, Graham Bowkett. Graham, you're leading New Zealander in 8th place. Everything running all right?
Yes, car's running very smoothly. We had to come a little early for the last pit stop. Got a flat tyre, but both cars are running extremely well.
You had a flat tyre. How did that happen? Just disappeared, or were you in that rough stuff?
I had a little nudge from behind down at the hairpin there, and on the next lap around it suddenly deflated, and luckily it wasn't too far to go to the pits, so we came in, and Kent got in the car a little early. We hope that he will be able to carry right through now to the end of the race.
You're looking very cool, and everybody else is looking very hot. You're taking it easy out there, were you?
Well, I've had a few minutes to take a rest, but I've only done 47 laps, so I haven't worked as hard as some of the others have.
Graham Bowkett, thanks very much. And waiting behind us, we have Graham Crosby to get into his car.
Okay, talking there with leading Kiwis of the moment, Ken Bajan and Graham Bowkett, with a rather battered-looking Nissan Skyline Turbo, and their other team car is right behind them in 9th place. And here is the car that has been black flagged. We suggested a couple of laps ago that it might burn off a little fuel and get rid of it out the breather, but it doesn't look like that is happening, and it's still spitting out just as much on every left-hand turn. And after it does that for a couple of laps, as you'd expect, the black flag has come out. They've been asked to come into the pits and check out that fuel system.
It's diminishing. I wonder whether they're being perhaps a little hard, because it's not going to keep on pouring it. We'll have a look see this time as they go through the left-hander. It's amazing. It's pretty quick on the black flag to get this car in. And yet it took them 55 minutes to get a black flag out to the Sierra of Neville Crichton with a large piece of bodywork hanging off it. I've got a feeling that had my signature on it. I thought I recognised the handwriting.
They are going to pit as the 24 car, the Nissan Skyline Turbo of Crosby and Sprague, goes back out with Crosby in it. This car is the one we're waiting for. We've had it confirmed that they have been black flagged. They are therefore bound to pit the next time round. It seems that Steve Soper is continuing. See if we can get a word down on the pits with Richard Hay, who I think has Pierre Dudonné standing by. Wait down on the pits, see if we can get a word with Pierre Dudonné. But it's a good lap ago that the black flag was confirmed as having been stuck out for Steve Soper. I haven't seen any great preponderance of black flags around the circuit, so he's likely to have seen it only when he came past the start-finish line.
Yeah, Dudonné, your second place is looking to be in jeopardy. They're about to bring your car in, I gather. Not just the team wanted in, but now the officials have black flagged it as well.
Yes. The reason for the black flag, I suppose, it looks that when we fuel the car, one of the refueling valve is stuck in open, so we're losing some fuel, and therefore the official have probably decided to stop the car, but we can fix that very, very quickly.
The car, of course, has two vents, doesn't it? One to pour fuel in, and one to allow the air that the fuel pushes out of the tank to escape.
That's right. There are two valves, one of each side of the car, and it seems that one is stuck in the open position.
But it won't take long to cure. It's just a matter of releasing it.
Well, I guess normally of just a few seconds, but still coming into the pit lane and leaving the pit, we will be losing, I reckon, minimum of 30 seconds.
Okay, so is he going to come in this time round? Meanwhile, car 46, Roberto Ravalia's car, is picking up time on the 7 car. It was 1 minute and 1 second behind. It's now picked up to 51 seconds behind. So we might be seeing a late charge from Roberto Ravalia, knowing that they don't need another fuel stop. There is Roberto Ravalia, having taken over from Emanuele Pirro. And we wait to see if that number 6 car is going to come in. fast as the Drink Pro and Drink Pro Corolla.